Everyone doubted the infertile and paralyzed tech CEO until one night, Triplets arrived against all odds. "Hello, my beautiful family. How are you all doing today, my beloved sweethearts? I bring to you another tale of love today. Now, before we go straight in, I want you to take a second to subscribe to our channel. It's an evidence that you love me and you love my stories. Please do well to hit the subscribe button because it means a lot to me. And also comment where you are watching from so we know how connected we are. Now let's begin with this beautiful story. The city shimmered like a faraway constellation beneath Tristan Caldwell's window, its brilliance a cruel contrast to the hollowness within him. Inside the penthouse, time didn't move. It hovered, stretched thin by silence and sorrow. He sat in the dim glow of a single lamp, hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair as if anchoring himself to something. Anything real. The doctor's words from months ago echoed endlessly. "You'll likely never father a child." That single sentence had shattered something inside him more completely than the accident that broke his spine. Tristan had conquered tech empires, redefined innovation, and built Novatech from a college dorm dream into a global force. But none of it, none, prepared him for the quiet devastation of being told he would never have a child. Not a son to teach, not a daughter to protect. Just empty rooms and echoing silence. The woman he'd once envisioned that future with had left before he could fully grasp the impact of the news. She vanished like vapor, unable to stomach the long months of physiotherapy, the slowness, the wheelchair. Worse, she sold her silence. Interviews, features, tabloid spreads. The rise and fall of Tristan Caldwell, they branded it. The broken billionaire. The words cut deeper than any surgical scar. He kept his face stoic in public. Smiled through shareholder meetings. Took calls like nothing had changed. But the truth? The truth sat in his bones like lead, pressing down on his soul, whispering that he was no longer a man who had it all, but a man with everything taken away. Then came Elena. A soft chime echoed from the private elevator. Tristan didn't need to look. He already knew who it was. She stepped into the apartment like the quiet grace of dawn. Elena Alvarez, his live-in physiotherapist and aide. She moved gently, as though the room itself could bruise. Dressed in simple leggings and a soft sweater, her long braid trailing over her shoulder, she looked like peace personified. She always did, and it unnerved him. "I saw your light," she said quietly, folding a blanket in her arms. "Thought you might need this." Without asking, she crossed the room and laid the blanket over his legs. His jaw tensed. He'd never once mentioned how cold they got at night, but she noticed. "Thank you," he said, voice barely audible. Elena crouched to meet his eyes, her face filled with that disarming warmth that made it hard to look at her for too long. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He gave a small shrug. "Work on my mind." They both knew it was a lie. Her hand hovered, hesitating between professional boundary and human instinct, then gently settled on his forearm. Her touch was feather light, but it might as well have been lightning through his veins. "You don't have to do this alone," she murmured. And that was the problem. He wanted to believe her. But Tristan had built entire fortresses around his pain. Letting her in would mean risking being seen, fully seen, and what if she saw only what others did? A shell, a headline. He swallowed hard. "I'm all right. You should get some rest." She hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Then she nodded. "I'm here if you need anything," she whispered. Her hand gave a soft squeeze. Then she stood, turned, and disappeared into the elevator. As the doors shut, the faint trace of vanilla and clean linen, her, lingered in the air. He closed his eyes and let it settle over him like memory. He shouldn't think of her this way. It was dangerous. But late at night, in the hours no one else saw, he sometimes imagined what it would feel like to hold her. To bury his face in her neck and let her kindness melt the ache in his chest. Tristan turned back to the window. Outside, millions lived their lives, lovers kissed in dim cafes. Parents tucked in children. Laughter floated from balconies. And he was alone in a cage made of steel, grief, and silent pride. As dawn crept across the city skyline, a new day beckoned. But for Tristan, it felt like nothing had changed. A week passed. Golden afternoon light filtered into the penthouse, painting warm stripes across the hardwood floors. Elena guided him through his daily stretches, correcting his posture with a firm, practiced hand. Her voice was gentle but focused. She never treated him like he was fragile, just human. Today, he was off. "You're quieter than usual," Elena said, rolling up the yoga mat. "Everything all right?" "Just tired," he muttered, already maneuvering his chair toward the desk. But even the simplest movement became a battlefield. One of the wheels snagged on the edge of the mat. The sudden jolt sent him sprawling forward. He hit the floor hard, pain lancing through his arm and shoulder. Elena cried out and rushed to his side. "Tristan, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he snapped, though pain throbbed beneath his skin. He tried to push himself up, but his legs twisted beneath him, useless like dead weight. "Damn it," he roared, slamming a fist into the floor. The crack of skin against wood was deafening. Elena flinched, but only for a second. Then she knelt beside him, laying a hand gently on his back. "Please," she whispered, "let me help." He wanted to resist. Pride reared its head, screaming to shove her away, but his body was tired, his heart even more so. He gave a small nod. She didn't flinch at his dead weight, didn't falter at the awkward angles or heavy limbs. With surprising strength and grace, she helped him sit up, back braced against the couch. Her breath mingled with his, warm and steady. "I'm sorry," he murmured, eyes fixed on the floor. "I shouldn't have yelled." She reached out and brushed the damp hair off his forehead. "There's nothing to apologize for," she said softly. "I've got you." He couldn't stop the tear that slipped down his cheek, and when she caught it with her thumb, something inside him cracked. Silent sobs racked his body. Years of restraint, of pride, of pretending. It all came rushing out. He pressed his face into her shoulder, and she held him like something precious, stroking his back, whispering nothing but steady reassurance. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. For the first time in his adult life, Tristan Caldwell didn't feel like he had to be strong. He felt safe. When his crying finally ebbed, he pulled back, ashamed. "Elena." It was real, and it changed everything. The moment their lips met, the world narrowed. It wasn't rushed or reckless, just slow, deliberate, and impossibly tender. Tristan didn't move at first, too stunned by the softness pressing against his mouth, too unsure it was real. But Elena didn't retreat. Her hand gently cupped his jaw, anchoring him to the moment, and the warmth of her breath mingled with his. Then, slowly, Tristan kissed her back. What started as cautious turned hungry. Hesitation melted beneath months, no years, of suppressed longing. Their lips molded together, and Elena sighed into him, her fingers slipping into his dark hair. That sigh stirred something inside Tristan, something fierce and raw. He lifted a hand, brushing it along her waist, feeling her tremble. She tasted of salt and something sweeter, hope, maybe. It was intoxicating. A soft moan escaped her throat when his tongue met hers, and he swallowed it like a lifeline. She shifted closer, her body pressing against his chest, warm and real and impossibly close. His body responded instantly. The nerve pathways below his waist might have been unreliable, but his desire, real and pulsing, was undeniable. Every inch of him ached to be closer, to know her in every way. But he pulled back. "Elena," he rasped, breathless, "you don't have to." "I want to," she whispered, her eyes glowing. "Not because I feel sorry for you, because I love you." Her words hit him like sunlight breaking through clouds. Tristan swallowed hard, searching her face. There was no doubt in her expression, no fear or pity, only certainty. A shaky laugh escaped him, half disbelief, half wonder. "I don't know if I remember how to be with someone." He nodded, throat tight. They didn't rush. They let the moment bloom. Elena shifted to her knees and began unbuttoning his shirt, fingers slow and reverent. With each button undone, she pressed a kiss to his skin, his chest, his collarbone, his shoulder, until the fabric fell away and he sat bare before her, vulnerable but unafraid. Tristan's hands trembled as he reached for her sweater, lifting it over her head. Her dark braid tumbled down her back as the soft fabric joined his shirt on the floor. She wasn't wearing a bra. His breath caught. She was beautiful, full curves, glowing skin, and eyes that held galaxies. He hesitated, unsure if he could touch her the way he wanted to, but Elena took his hand and guided it to her breast, resting it there with a contented hum. His thumb grazed the taut peak, drawing a gasp from her lips. "Elena," he murmured, the syllables reverent. She leaned down and kissed him again, this time with fire. They moved slowly to the floor, the plush rug beneath them a cradle for what was about to unfold. Tristan lay back as Elena straddled his hips, her hands braced on his shoulders. She rolled her hips experimentally and moaned when she felt his growing arousal press against her. He bit his lip, heart racing. "I can feel you," he said, wonder thick in his voice. Her smile was radiant. "Good." She leaned down and kissed his neck, trailing her mouth down his chest. Tristan's muscles clenched, every inch of him alive with sensation. When her lips found his nipple, he gasped and fisted the rug. Elena. She hummed, her tongue circling the sensitive peak. I don't know how long I can last, he admitted, voice shaky. She met his eyes and smiled. Then let's not wait. They fumbled out of the last of their clothes, socks, pants, underwear, laughing quietly when one of her leggings caught at the ankle. When they were both bare, Elena knelt above him, her thighs framing his waist. Tristan stared up at her, drinking her in. You're breathtaking, he whispered. Elena flushed, but her eyes were steady. Taking his hand, she guided it between her legs. He found her slick with need, her body hot and ready. He slipped a finger inside, marveling at the tight, pulsing heat. Her head tipped back, lips parted in a breathless moan. Oh! The sound undid him. Carefully, she reached down and positioned him at her entrance. They paused, foreheads touching, breaths shared. Tristan's eyes widened. The sensation was overwhelming, wet, warm, and impossibly tight. He groaned, the sound raw and visceral. Elena whimpered as she took him deeper, inch by inch, her nails digging into his shoulders. When their hips met, she stilled. They breathed together, adjusting to the sudden, glorious fullness. He was inside her, completely. She rocked gently, and Tristan's head fell back with a moan. God! Elena moved with slow, aching rhythm, lifting and lowering herself over him. Tristan gripped her hips, helping guide the motion, stunned by how natural it felt, how right. Every motion sent pleasure blooming through his body. But it wasn't just the physical, it was the way she looked at him, the way she whispered his name, the way her body seemed to know exactly what he needed. He cupped her breasts, thumbs brushing over the hard peaks, and she cried out, riding him faster. Don't hold back, she whispered, breathless. I want to feel all of you. That was all it took. Tristan surged upward, meeting her rhythm, driving deeper. Elena trembled above him, hands grasping his face as she moaned his name again and again. Her thighs quivered, her breath hitched. I'm close, she gasped. He reached between them and circled her clit with his fingers. Her entire body stiffened, then convulsed in a blinding climax. She cried out, her body clenching around him, the sensation sending him spiraling after her. Tristan groaned, pulling her down as he spilled into her, hips jerking with each pulse of release. They clung to each other through it, mouths searching, breath tangled. When the tremors passed, they collapsed into a heap of limbs and kisses and wonder. Elena curled against his chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his skin. He held her close, heart still racing, and kissed the top of her head. I didn't think I'd ever feel this again, he whispered. You're not alone, she replied softly. Not anymore. Tristan's arms tightened around her. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. In that moment, wrapped in her warmth, he knew. Something inside him had shifted. The cold silence of his nights had been replaced by fire. Not just passion, but love. Real, burning, consuming love. The kind that didn't come often. The kind that stayed. It began with a tiny stick and 2 pink lines. Elena stood frozen in the soft light of the kitchen, holding the pregnancy test in trembling hands. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out every sound in the apartment. She stared at the result again, unchanged, definite, pregnant. Her knees nearly gave way beneath her. One hand instinctively moved to her belly, which hadn't changed yet, not visibly. But something was happening inside her. Life, new, fragile life. Her mouth went dry. She tried to steady her breathing, but joy and panic swirled together in a dizzying cocktail. This wasn't just unexpected, it was unthinkable. Tristan had been told it was impossible. She had heard it from him directly, back when trust was still tentative and pain still raw. There's no chance. The accident changed everything. It didn't feel like a mistake. It didn't feel like a problem. It felt like a miracle wrapped in uncertainty. Elena placed the test down gently and reached into her sweater pocket, retrieving a folded printout. The black and white ultrasound she had received yesterday. Her eyes scanned the faint shadows and curves. Not 1, not 2, 3. Triplets. The doctor had looked at her like she'd grown wings. You're only 8 weeks, but there are 3 sacs, 3 heartbeats. Even now, Elena could hardly believe it. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Tristan would be off his conference call soon. She had to tell him. But how? She padded barefoot toward his office, the scan clutched in her fist, heart hammering harder with each step. She found him facing the window, sunlight haloing his dark hair, one hand gently massaging the shoulder that still ached from his earlier fall. He looked peaceful, calm. She hated that she was about to shatter that. He turned at the sound of her steps, a smile blooming across his face, until he saw her expression. "Elena?" he asked gently. "What's wrong?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. Then she stepped forward and took his hands, guiding them to rest low on her abdomen. I have something to tell you," she whispered. He frowned. "You're scaring me." She bit her lip, then looked him straight in the eye. "I'm pregnant." The words landed like a thunderclap. Then something flickered in his gaze. Wonder, maybe. His mouth opened like he might speak, but nothing came, just breath. "We're having a baby," he whispered. Elena hesitated, then unfolded the sonogram and placed it in his hands. His eyes scanned it, confused. "What am I looking at?" She knelt down in front of him, covering his hand with hers. "That's them," she said softly. "3 of them." He looked again. "Triplets." His head jerked up, disbelief etched in every line of his face. "3?" he choked. "Yes," she whispered. "3. I'm 8 weeks along." There was a stunned silence. Tristan sat like a statue, clutching the ultrasound like it might disappear. Elena watched the storm rise behind his eyes. Hope, confusion, joy, and something else. Fear. Then a question he hadn't wanted to ask slipped from his lips. "But how can I be sure?" Elena blinked. The question struck like a slap. Her heart twisted. "You're asking if they're yours," she said quietly. "No," he gasped. "God, no. That's not what I mean. Elena, they told me I couldn't. I believed it. I've lived with it. And now this, it feels impossible." Her jaw tightened. "So instead of trusting me, you trust the doctor who gave you a prediction, not a certainty." "It's not about trusting you," he insisted, visibly unraveling. "It's about me. I've made peace with being incapable. I don't know how to wrap my head around this." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You think I'm lying?" "No," he whispered, stricken. "I think I'm scared." She stepped back, pain crackling in her chest. "I can't believe you'd even question this," she said, voice shaking. "You know me. You know me." "I do," he cried. "I know you'd never lie. But my brain, it keeps screaming that this isn't real." Her arms wrapped around her midsection protectively. "I need some air," she whispered, voice breaking. But she was already turning, grabbing her coat. She slipped out the door before he could stop her. The apartment fell into a crushing stillness. Tristan sat frozen, the ultrasound photo clutched in his hand. The miracle he had never allowed himself to imagine was here. The shame was unbearable. A sob tore loose from his throat. "What have I done?" he whispered. He fumbled for his phone and called the fertility specialist who had delivered the verdict years ago. To his surprise, the doctor answered. "Tristan?" came the familiar voice. "It's been a while." He explained everything, voice shaking. The pregnancy, the triplets, the timing. There was a pause. Then, gently, "Tristan, I told you your chances were low, not zero. Healing can change a lot. Hormones fluctuate. I've seen stranger things." "So it's possible?" He croaked. "It's more than possible. Triplets are rare, but they're yours." Tristan's breath caught. He closed his eyes, and he had let his fear drive her away. He grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator, refusing to waste another second. He found her in the park across the street, curled on a bench beneath a willow tree, shoulders trembling. "Elena," he called softly. She looked up, startled, and then stunned. He was crawling across the grass toward her, having left his wheelchair at the edge of the path. His coat dragged behind him, knees scraping the cold ground. She jumped up. "What are you doing?" "Let me say this," he said, breathless. "Please." She hesitated. "I was wrong," he rasped. "I was scared and selfish and stupid. I didn't doubt you, Elena. I doubted the miracle. I couldn't believe something so beautiful could happen to me. But I believe now. I swear I do." She blinked rapidly, tears brimming. "I love you," he said hoarsely. "I love our babies. And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." Her chest rose with a shaky breath. Then she sank to her knees in front of him. "I needed to hear that," she whispered. "I'll never make you doubt it again," he vowed, taking her hands. "I'm all in. Forever." When they broke apart, both of them were crying. It was from joy. Tristan couldn't stop holding her, even after Elena had forgiven him, even after the tears and the whispered promises. He still had his arms wrapped around her like he might lose her if he let go. They sat beneath the willow tree, the city buzzing somewhere beyond the leaves, but here, everything was still. She rested against his chest and he cradled her there, his coat tucked around her shoulders. They didn't speak much, not because there was nothing to say, but because what they felt didn't need words. Regret had melted into relief, fear into faith. At last, Elena stirred and looked up at him. "Let's go home," she said softly. He nodded. She helped him back into his wheelchair, one hand always on his arm. Her touch grounded him. Back at the penthouse, the door hadn't even clicked shut before Tristan pulled her into his lap. Their mouths met instantly, hungry, desperate, tender. "I'm sorry," he whispered between kisses, "for doubting you, for doubting them." "I know," she said, fingers curling into his hair. "I just needed you to believe." "I do. Completely." His voice cracked. "I love you, and I love them. I'm ready now." She pulled back slightly, tears in her eyes, but her smile was steady. "Then show me." He wheeled them straight into the bedroom. They undressed with trembling urgency. Elena peeled away his coat and shirt, pressing soft kisses to every new inch of skin. He tugged her sweater over her head, revealing her flushed skin and dark eyes filled with longing. Their hands explored with reverence. It wasn't just passion. It was an apology, a thank you, a vow. As they tumbled onto the bed, Elena rolled atop him, straddling his hips. Her hair spilled over her shoulders as she leaned down to kiss him, long and slow. Tristan's hands roamed up her sides, cupping her breasts. She gasped softly as his thumbs brushed her nipples, then arched into his touch. "I missed you," he murmured against her skin. "Even when you were right there." She smiled, breathless. "I know, but you're here now." They moved together like a prayer. Tristan kissed along her jaw, down to her collarbone. Elena whimpered as his mouth found the swell of her breast, suckling gently. Her fingers tightened in his hair. He traced her curves, marveling at the subtle changes already blooming in her body. When his hand came to rest low over her belly, he paused. "They're in there," he whispered, wonder thick in his voice. Elena covered his hand with hers. "Yes, all three." His eyes shimmered. He lifted her face to his and kissed her, tenderly, slowly, full of reverence. She guided him into her again with practiced ease, her body welcoming him like he belonged there. They gasped in unison, foreheads pressed close. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Always," he replied. Their rhythm was unhurried, a slow dance in soft light. Tristan brushed strands of hair from her face as she rode him, their eyes locked. There was nothing frantic now, only presence, only truth. "I love you," she whispered between gasps. "I love you more than I ever thought I could," he said, voice raw. Her release came quietly, a shiver, a sigh, a quaking breath as her body clenched around his. He followed moments later, eyes squeezed shut, spilling himself inside her with a soft, guttural moan. They clung to each other, chests heaving, breath mingled. After a long silence, Tristan spoke. "I'll never take this for granted again," he whispered. "Any of it." Elena kissed his temple, her eyes wet again. "Neither will I." They stayed tangled together, limbs intertwined and hearts laid bare. There was no room for doubt now, only faith, only love. Later, they lay side by side under the sheets, her head tucked beneath his chin, one hand resting protectively over her belly. His fingers traced idle circles over her spine. Tristan stared at the ceiling, still overwhelmed by it all. The journey, the pain, the redemption, and now this. A new future unfolding in quiet breaths beside him. "I was so scared I'd lost you," he said. "You didn't," she murmured. "You found me again." He turned to face her fully. "Will you marry me?" Elena blinked. "Then stay with me," he whispered. "Forever." "I already have," she replied, wrapping herself around him again. That night they didn't sleep much. They whispered dreams into each other's skin, names for the babies, hopes for their new life. Fears, too, but they spoke them together, and when dawn crept across the sky once more, they were still wrapped around each other, warm, connected, whole. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as one, as a family. Hello, my beautiful and wonderful family. If this story touches your heart, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share. We bring you beautiful stories and tales every day, the one that fits your soul and moves your heart. Now let's continue with our beautiful story. The hospital room was filled with light. Morning had arrived softly, the sunlight spilling through the tall windows in quiet streams. Tristan sat beside the bed, one hand cradling Elena's, the other supporting the smallest bundle he had ever held in his life. His son, barely 4 pounds, swaddled in blue, sleeping like he'd already conquered the world. On the hospital bed, Elena lay against a stack of pillows, 2 tiny girls nestled at her breasts, nursing side by side. Their soft sucking sounds, their miniature hands, the way their lashes fluttered, Tristan could hardly breathe for the wonder of it all. He looked down at the baby boy in his arms. The baby's fingers had curled around the fabric of Tristan's shirt. His tiny chest rose and fell in rhythm with his father's heartbeat. The past 2 days had been a blur. Elena's early labor, the emergency C-section, the tension in every doctor's voice, the white sheets, the monitor beeping, the smell of antiseptic. But now there was peace. Now there were 3 tiny reasons to believe in miracles. "How are you feeling?" he asked Elena softly. "Sore," she replied, her voice raspy but light. "And grateful." Tristan smiled, unable to stop himself from leaning in, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "You're incredible." "I look like I survived a war," she teased gently. "You won one," he murmured. Elena laughed, though it was weary. "Help me switch them?" she asked, nodding at the 2 girls. "This one's drifting off." With practiced care, Tristan handed their son into the arms of the nurse waiting nearby, then moved to help reposition the girls, supporting their fragile bodies as one latched onto the other side. "Perfect," Elena sighed as the second twin began to nurse. She looked at Tristan then, her gaze so full it nearly knocked the air from his lungs. "We did this?" He nodded. "Yeah, we did." Another nurse re-entered, checking monitors and vitals. She glanced over and smiled kindly. "They're all doing beautifully," she said. "You're a lucky pair." When the room quieted again, Tristan sat beside the bassinet where his son had been returned. The boy stirred, face scrunching slightly before settling again. Tristan watched him for a long moment, then reached out and gently touched his cheek with one knuckle. "You're real," he whispered. "You're really mine." Elena smiled as she watched him. "I keep expecting to wake up." "You won't," he replied. "This is our life now." He reached over to the nightstand where his phone vibrated. A message had arrived, from his head of PR. He opened it absently, only to find a news headline waiting for him. Tristan Caldwell welcomes triplets with mystery woman, from infamy to family. The tech world's former broken billionaire turns the page with a surprise birth announcement. He chuckled and showed Elena. She read it and laughed, shaking her head. "They really have a way with titles. Let them write whatever they want," Tristan said. "I've got everything I need right here." The girls finished feeding. A nurse came in to burp and swaddle them, placing them gently in the bassinet with their brother. All 3 lay nestled together, barely distinguishable by their pastel-colored tags, blue, pink, and pink. Tristan sat back on the edge of Elena's bed, drawing her into his arms. She exhaled against his shoulder, eyes fluttering closed. "You should sleep," he whispered. "Only if you'll stay right here. I'm not going anywhere." And he meant it. They rested together for a while. When a knock came at the door, a staff member from the neonatal unit peeked in. "Would you like to choose names now? We can finalize their ID bands." Tristan and Elena exchanged a glance. "I've had 3 names in my head for weeks," she said, smiling. "Jude," she repeated, her eyes soft. "I love that. For the girls, Ava and Camilla." Elena gasped. "That's exactly what I had." Tristan blinked. "You're kidding." "Nope," she said. "Ava, Camilla, and Jude." He kissed her, laughing into her smile. They gave the names to the staff member, who nodded and made notes before leaving them alone again. Tristan stood and walked over to the bassinet. He gently traced each name tag. Ava, Camilla, Jude, his future. Elena watched him from the bed, her heart full. He had changed, no longer the man caged by what he'd lost, no longer afraid to hope. She called to him softly. He turned, and she reached out a hand. He crossed the room, took it, and sank onto the bed beside her again. "What is it? I was just thinking. Maybe now would be a good time to start writing the next chapter." The moment stretched out in silence, warm and full. Outside the hospital window, the spring sun climbed higher. The city bustled on, unaware of what had just changed in this small, quiet room. But for Tristan and Elena, the world had shifted. Not long ago, he had stared out windows praying for something more, wondering if he'd ever feel whole again. Now, with Elena's hand in his, and 3 new lives sleeping peacefully nearby, he finally understood. He wasn't broken. He had simply been waiting, waiting for this. Love had not just saved him, it had completed him, and as he closed his eyes beside the woman he would soon call wife, Tristan Caldwell knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning.
A humble girl pays for a stranger's breakfast, unaware she just fed a powerful CEO in disguise. What he did next left the entire cafe speechless. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The buzz of the early morning crowd filled the quaint little cafe, a cozy corner shop that offered home-brewed coffee and warm pastries to everyone, from construction workers in dusty overalls to pressed suit professionals checking their emails on sleek phones. It was the sort of place where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the aroma of espresso, creating a comforting blanket against the outside world. But for Lily Hart, the cafe was more than just a routine stop. It was a small haven where she could briefly forget the worries of her ordinary life. At 24, Lily was used to wearing two hats. One as a part-time library assistant who shelved books quietly, and another as a volunteer for the local community center, where she taught reading skills to children whose families couldn't afford private tutors. She was known for her modest smile and her quiet willingness to help wherever she could. People often referred to her as the sweet girl in the flower print dress, a nickname she'd acquired for her simple wardrobe. She had never aspired to stand out in a crowd, preferring kindness and small, thoughtful gestures over making a big fuss. That morning, Lily slipped into the cafe for her usual order, a small cappuccino and a day-old muffin discounted to half price. Money was tight, and every saved penny mattered. She counted her coins before approaching the register, making sure she had exactly enough for the treat she allowed herself only once a week. The cafe's bright-eyed barista, Amy, greeted her with a warm wave. "Morning, Lily," Amy said, already reaching for the cappuccino cup. "The usual?" "Yes, please," Lily replied, returning the wave. "I've been looking forward to it all week." A few spots down the counter, a tall man in a slightly wrinkled business suit stood with a phone pressed to his ear. He was clearly out of place, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, glancing at the cafe's blackboard menu as though he'd never set foot there before. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hair slightly ruffled, and in a quiet moment, Lily overheard him muttering about a misplaced wallet. "Look," he said into the phone, voice low but edged with frustration. "I'm running late and I left my wallet in the car. No, I can't go back now. Is there any chance you can—" He paused, rolling his eyes at the response on the other end. "Fine. We'll talk later." He ended the call with a sigh, patted his coat pockets, and finding nothing, cursed under his breath. The barista was waiting for him to decide on an order, but the man's obvious annoyance at himself made it clear he was about to walk out. Lily, still waiting to pay for her modest breakfast, felt a pang of empathy. She'd been in a similar spot countless times, short on cash, short on luck. Almost without thinking, she stepped forward. She began quietly. "I can pay for your coffee, if you'd like." The man turned, and for the first time Lily really saw his face. Deep-set eyes, sharp features, and a presence that felt more formidable than his rumpled suit suggested. Surprise flickered in his gaze. "That's all right," he began, voice rough with fatigue. "I don't want to trouble—" "It's no trouble," Lily said, mustering a small smile. "I really don't mind." Amy, the barista, watched the scene with curiosity. "You sure, Lily? I know money's always—" "It's fine," Lily insisted, cheeks coloring with embarrassment at being so transparent. "I'd like to help." The man hesitated for a moment, then nodded briskly. "Thank you," he said in a low tone. "That's very kind of you." He ordered a simple black coffee and a croissant. Lily's own cappuccino and muffin seemed meager by comparison, but she reached into her purse, counted out the exact change, and placed it on the counter. Whatever this man was going through, she figured her small act of kindness would at least get him through the morning with a warm beverage in hand. Once she paid, Lily collected her items. She expected the man to dash out with a hurried thanks, but instead he lingered, balancing his coffee and pastry. He studied her face as if trying to reconcile her generosity with her timid demeanor. "Do you—" he began, clearing his throat. "Do you work around here?" She shrugged. "Not too far. I volunteer at the community center down the street. It's not a full-time job, but I love it." He nodded. "I see." There was a flicker in his eyes then, something that might have been curiosity or maybe just gratitude. Lily couldn't tell. "My name's David," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm even, yet the way he carried himself screamed tension. "Nice to meet you, David," she replied softly. "I'm Lily." Before she could ask him anything else, like how he ended up at the cafe without his wallet so early, or if he needed more help, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then returned his attention to her. "I really appreciate this," he told her, raising the coffee cup. "I owe you." Lily only shook her head. "Don't worry about it. I've been helped plenty of times, too." He opened his mouth as though to say something else, but an incoming call made his phone ring again. With an apologetic shrug, he answered and hurried outside. In less than a minute, he was gone, and Lily was left with a wave of relief that she had actually done something good for a stranger, even if it cost her a bit more than she'd planned. The press of the day, her responsibilities and the routine of her life quickly swept away the moment, and she left the cafe without a second thought. What Lily didn't see, and probably wouldn't have noticed, was how the manager of the cafe peered through the window at David climbing into the back of a sleek black car. The manager's eyebrows shot up. David didn't seem like an ordinary man scrounging for coins. In fact, no one recognized him as a local, though rumors began almost immediately, as rumors often do. Some customers swore they had seen his face before. Others suggested maybe he was just a traveling businessman. And one older gentleman with keen eyes insisted that he looked an awful lot like someone from the Sunday business profiles in the newspaper. But Lily knew none of that as she walked to the library to start her shift, her heart a little lighter than usual. She was confident she had done the right thing, paying for a stranger's breakfast, a small kindness that might never come back to her in any form. Still, the warmth of that act lingered in her chest. By late afternoon, however, she had all but forgotten the incident. She spent the day cataloging new books, assisting elderly patrons in finding historical records, and helping children pronounce new words. A few hours later, after finishing her shift, Lily volunteered at the community center. There, she read to a group of wide-eyed toddlers. Their excitement over simple picture books always lifted her mood. On the way home, Lily realized she had spent all her spare change on that morning's extra order. She ended up walking instead of taking the bus, braving a drizzle that left her flower print dress damp and her hair clinging to the sides of her face. Despite the minor discomfort, she held on to the sense of contentment that came with doing something nice for someone else, no matter how small. She reached her tiny apartment, its exterior paint chipped and its hallway lights flickering. Inside, she brewed some tea, turned on a single lamp, and settled at her desk. From a window, she watched the city lights flicker in the distance. Lily let out a content sigh. Life wasn't glamorous, and she didn't have much, but she took pride in giving what she could. Unbeknownst to her, that single gesture in the cafe had triggered a ripple that was already spreading. And across town, behind the polished glass walls of a towering skyscraper, David, whose real name was not just David, but David Harrington, CEO of one of the most influential tech conglomerates, was staring down at the city through rain-speckled windows. In his mind, he kept replaying the moment Lily offered to pay for his breakfast. He hadn't expected such kindness, least of all from someone who, by all appearances, had little to spare. And now, in the hush of his corner office, he made a decision, one that would alter Lily's life in ways she could never predict. The stage was set, and soon enough the entire city, starting with that humble cafe, would be left speechless by what he planned to do next. Evening lights shimmered across towering office blocks as David Harrington, still wearing the same tired suit from that morning, stepped out of his private elevator onto the executive floor of Harrington Innovations. His footsteps echoed along the glass-walled corridor, each stride carrying a renewed sense of purpose. Hours earlier, frustration had pulsed through him when he realized he'd forgotten his wallet. Now the memory of Lily's simple kindness lingered in his mind. David was a man used to reading people, colleagues, competitors, even the board of directors that tried to box him in. Yet no reading of Lily was required. She radiated sincerity so pure it felt disarming. A few of his top executives were waiting in the conference room, an expanse of marble flooring and tinted windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Typically, David would stride in, exuding quiet authority, and begin dissecting profit margins or growth strategies. Tonight, however, he paused by the frosted glass doors, recalling how Lily had looked at him with neither expectation nor curiosity, just genuine concern. Her generosity had been so offhand and matter-of-fact that it struck him far deeper than any orchestrated philanthropy event ever had. He ran a hand over his chin, realizing he was still unshaven. The day's string of meetings had left him ragged, and the swirl of corporate life seemed especially hollow this evening. He exhaled quietly, squared his shoulders, and entered the conference room to address his waiting team. Seated around the polished table was his chief financial officer, a short, precise woman whose every gesture screamed efficiency. Next to her sat the head of operations, tapping a pen, clearly impatient to brief him on the day's acquisitions. Further down the table were a handful of advisors, all wearing the uniform of the corporate world, suits in dark hues, subdued ties, and expressions practiced to display calm. The glow of the overhead lights contrasted sharply with the stormy skies visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Mr. Harrington," the CFO began, her tone crisp, "we've finalized the Asia-Pacific expansion budget. We can cover all new hires if we reallocate from the R&D surplus." He lifted a hand politely, cutting her off. "That can wait," he said, voice measured. "We'll address expansions tomorrow. For now, I need an update on the philanthropic initiative we discussed last quarter." A flicker of surprise passed among them. Philanthropy wasn't at the top of the agenda, not with ongoing overseas negotiations and ambitious product rollouts slated for the coming quarter. Yet David's gaze left no room for argument, and the CFO nodded in acknowledgement. She scanned the papers in front of her. "Of course, sir. The Foundation Department submitted proposals for community outreach, including scholarships and youth programs. They're waiting for final approval. Bring those to my office first thing," David said decisively. "And get me a detailed outline of local programs, especially smaller ones, like community centers, literacy charities, that kind of thing." The CFO stopped flipping pages, glancing up. "Local, sir? Our usual philanthropic footprint is national. You asked us to focus on broader impact causes." "I'm aware," he interrupted, not unkindly. "I'm adjusting the plan. It's time to look closer to home." Although no one dared question him outright, the air was thick with unspoken queries. He noticed the head of operations exchanging a brief look with another colleague. the universal language of subordinates trying to puzzle out a boss's new direction. But David offered no further explanation. He simply rose, gathered his jacket, and walked out with a quiet confidence that signaled the meeting was over. Back at his private corner office, David loosened his tie and took a moment to survey the city below. Rain still glistened on the streets, reflecting in puddles like small patches of light. Farther in the distance, near the old district, the silhouette of older buildings reminded him that not everyone lived in glass penthouses or had drivers and private elevators. His entire empire was built on the foundation of meeting consumer needs, capturing new markets, and staying one step ahead of the competition. Yet the memory of Lily's earnest face reminded him that there were people out there for whom a cup of coffee was a luxury, and her willingness to give up that small luxury for a stranger shook him in a way he wasn't prepared to admit. Settling into the high-backed leather chair at his desk, David sent an urgent email to the foundation department, demanding immediate details on local nonprofits, especially any that focused on literacy or community upliftment. He typed with a fervor that startled even him. Moments later, his assistant Marjorie knocked lightly and stepped inside. "Mr. Harrington, you asked for an overview of tomorrow's calls? They've been rearranged to accommodate your request." He nodded in thanks. "Also, I need contact info for the Redwood Community Center. See if you can find out who runs their volunteer reading programs. And have it to me tonight, please." Marjorie, no stranger to odd requests, simply jotted it down. "Certainly." "Thank you," David said quietly, watching her retreat. In the reflection of the now darkened window, he noticed his own face looked drawn. It had been a long day, capped by an unexpected jolt of empathy. He rose to fetch a stack of half-forgotten folders from a side cabinet, determined to keep busy until he heard back from his philanthropic division. Yet no matter how many spreadsheets or strategic plans he scanned, the same thought pulsed through his head. She didn't even know who I was, and she still paid. Meanwhile, Lily was at home, listening to the pitter-patter of rain against her living room window. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. She was grading some homework assignments for the after-school reading group at the community center. Although she wasn't formally a teacher, she devoted extra hours to help kids practice grammar and vocabulary. She firmly believed that words could open entire worlds, particularly for those who grew up without many resources. As she marked little stars and smiley faces on each worksheet, Lily recalled the man from the cafe. She wondered if he'd managed to sort out his day after that frantic phone call and rushed exit. She hadn't even told him which days she volunteered at the center, or that she had an unstoppable sweet tooth for half-priced muffins. But it wasn't a big deal. She didn't expect to see him again. Sometimes life's collisions with strangers were just fleeting moments, meant to pass as quickly as they began. Lily's phone buzzed, an incoming text from a coworker at the library reminding her about an upcoming budget cut meeting. She sighed. If the library lost more funds, she might see her hours reduced even further, which would make life more challenging. Pressing her lips together, she forced a reassuring smile at the stack of children's worksheets on her table. These kids had bigger worries than a single grown woman's income shortfalls. She'd find a way to cope. As she rose to grab a mug of tea, Lily felt a sharp sting in her ankle. She winced, remembering how she'd twisted it a bit on her walk home through slick puddles. With no health insurance to cover a fancy checkup and a bank balance that barely kept her afloat, she settled for some ointment, the same brand she'd used since she was a child. It served as a painful reminder that living on the edge meant no accidents, no errors, no extra splurges. Still, a small warmth settled over her when she remembered how she'd been able to help someone that morning. An odd sense of peace accompanied the thought that maybe, just maybe, that man had felt a spark of hope from her gesture. She placed the mug on her nightstand and lay down, letting the hum of the city lull her to sleep. 2 days passed. The busyness of life consumed Lily's hours. Shifts at the library, tutoring sessions at the community center, grocery runs for discounted bread. She'd almost forgotten David and the morning she bought him breakfast. Her world marched on at a gentle, unremarkable pace, filled with small joys and small struggles. But in a high-rise apartment across town, a different pace of life rattled on. David, though always a picture of calm in boardrooms, found himself restless. He scanned the philanthropic proposals, dissatisfied. They seemed too grandiose, massive scholarship funds or glitzy banquets that had more to do with PR than actual impact. He wanted to help real people in tangible ways. And so, late on a Wednesday night as he nursed a coffee in his penthouse living room, David composed an email to the Redwood Community Center. The email was straightforward, introducing himself as someone eager to learn more about their reading programs and volunteer opportunities. He didn't drop the Harrington Innovations name just yet. He wanted the genuine story, unfiltered by the knowledge that he was a powerful CEO. When he pressed send, a strange flutter in his stomach almost made him chuckle. It was like he was stepping into a world he once knew but had long abandoned for corporate corridors and strategic expansions. On Thursday afternoon, Lily was busy reorganizing the children's book section at the library when the volunteer coordinator from the community center, Ms. Burns, rushed in. Ms. Burns was a lively woman in her 50s, always wearing colorful scarves that matched her equally colorful personality. "Lily!" she called in a hushed tone befitting the library setting. "We just got an email from a potential new volunteer. He sounds, well, interesting." Lily raised her brows curiously. "A new volunteer? That's great. We can always use more help. Did he say what he wants to do?" "Reading programs, apparently. He claims he stumbled upon our name recently and wants to observe a class or two." Ms. Burns paused, rummaging through her satchel. "I'm printing out his message. I can't quite place it, but something about the tone tells me he's not your typical local. It's too polished, if you know what I mean." Lily gently pushed a stack of picture books onto a lower shelf. "Well, let's see if he sticks around. People volunteer for a day and vanish sometimes. We'll see how it goes." Ms. Burns let out a small laugh. "True enough, but if he's serious, maybe it'll lighten your load. You practically live at that center, my dear." Before Lily could respond, Ms. Burns's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, mouthed an apology, and hurried off to take the call. Lily stood there, heart quietly hopeful. More volunteers meant the kids would have extra attention, new voices to read stories, possibly new ideas. It was a good sign, especially since budgets everywhere were tight. Yet, as she slid another book into place, a faint echo of that morning in the cafe surfaced in her mind. She wondered if that man, David, had also found some relief in an unexpected place. Life, she reminded herself, was full of small miracles hidden in ordinary days. And for now, the promise of a new volunteer, no matter how polished he might be, felt like another small miracle unfolding. A late afternoon sun cast gentle beams through tall arched windows of the Redwood Community Center. The building itself was modest, 2 stories of worn brick with a small patch of grass out front that doubled as a playground when the weather was warm. That day, half a dozen children darted around the yard, squealing with delight as they chased a half-deflated soccer ball. Inside, the walls displayed colorful drawings and taped-up motivational quotes, some of them authored by the very kids who attended programs there. Lily sat in the reading room, a cozy nook lined with second-hand bookshelves that Ms. Burns and other volunteers had lovingly stocked with donated children's stories. Each shelf was painted a different pastel color, and the ceiling was draped with hanging paper stars. Lily's small group of early arrivers, 3 kids between ages 8 and 10, were quietly bent over their reading exercises. She floated from one child to another, offering gentle corrections and encouraging words. Outside the reading nook, Ms. Burns paced near the reception desk, checking her watch. A wide window offered a glimpse of the parking lot. Every so often, she peeked out as though expecting someone. Ever since receiving that polished email from a mysterious new volunteer, Ms. Burns had been restlessly eager to see what he was about. So far, the only visitors who'd arrived were parents picking up or dropping off kids. At last, Ms. Burns spotted a sleek, dark car pull into one of the parking spots. Out stepped a tall man in a crisp collared shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He seemed to take in the humble exterior of the community center with careful, measured interest, then headed for the entrance. Ms. Burns offered him a polite smile as he pushed the glass door open. "Hello there," she greeted. "You must be the gentleman who emailed?" David Harrington nodded, adjusting the strap of a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He'd deliberately dressed down, no tie, no jacket, hoping to pass as an average corporate employee curious about volunteer work. "That's right," he replied, voice calm but friendly. "I'm David." "Wonderful. I'm Ms. Burns. I coordinate the after-school reading sessions." She extended a hand, which David accepted. "We're a pretty small operation, so any new volunteer is a blessing." Despite her polite words, she was studying him closely, probably noting the expensive watch on his wrist or the slight refinement in his posture that didn't exactly scream small-town volunteer. But Ms. Burns was used to reading people, and if she had any suspicions, she kept them behind her welcoming smile. "I'd love to see how your sessions run," David said, conscious of how it felt to be in this unvarnished space where bright crayons and battered beanbags replaced the marble floors he was used to. "I'm hoping to help however I can." "Well," Ms. Burns said, leading him down the hallway, "the kids are in the reading room now. One of our most dedicated volunteers is working with them. You can watch quietly if you like. Just so you know, the group can be a bit shy at first." "That's fine," David assured her. "I'm looking forward to it." They passed a mural of forest animals painted in cheerful hues: raccoons, deer, and bright blue birds. David noticed the peeling edges of the mural. It was clearly done on a tight budget, but the whimsical spirit made it no less charming. He could already sense the place was kept afloat by people's passion and goodwill, rather than by any robust funding. At the doorway to the reading room, Ms. Burns paused, gesturing for David to look inside. Seated on small plastic chairs around a low table were 3 kids intently working on their assignments. Their volunteer teacher, the one Ms. Burns said was so dedicated, had her back turned, bent over a young boy's worksheet. David, standing in the threshold, felt a curious flutter of anticipation. A few steps in, and he caught sight of the volunteer's profile: a soft face, long hair pulled into a simple ponytail, and a floral-patterned blouse. He blinked. It can't be. Even before she lifted her head, David recognized her. Lily. The same Lily who'd bought him coffee that morning in the cafe not long ago, and now, here she was, that gentle presence in her eyes as she patiently explained a sentence to a student. His heart kicked in his chest. Of all the possible volunteers he might have encountered here, it had to be her. The irony was staggering. Ms. Burns, oblivious to his internal swirl, tapped Lily lightly on the shoulder. "Hey, Lily," she said in a quiet tone. "Our new volunteer is here to observe the session. Mind if he joins?" Lily turned her head, eyebrows rising slightly. Their gazes met. For a second, David feared she'd immediately recognize him, but she seemed uncertain at first, as though searching his face for a memory. He realized he looked a bit different. No rumpled suit, no frantic expression, no phone calls pressed to his ear. She offered a polite smile. "I'm Lily," she said softly. "Welcome. Feel free to sit in if you like." Then she blinked, a flicker of recognition brightening her eyes. "Have we—" "Sorry, you look familiar." David swallowed. He had prepared no real plan for this scenario. Instead of revealing himself, he mustered a friendly shrug. I've been around," he replied vaguely, forcing a casual chuckle. "Maybe you saw me in the neighborhood, but it's nice to meet you properly, Lily." She gave him a second, more curious look. His face and voice definitely triggered something in her memory. but there was nothing else to do but let it pass. She nodded, then returned to the boy's worksheet, pointing to a sentence that read, "The cat saw its reflection." "Okay, look here," Lily instructed, glancing once at the new volunteer before focusing on the child. "We need to correct the spelling. It should be its, no apostrophe, because we're talking about something belonging to the cat, right?" The child nodded, erasing the mistake. Lily beamed, giving him a soft pat on the back. "See? You got it." David stepped closer, taking a seat on a spare chair against the wall. He observed quietly for the next few minutes, intrigued by the way Lily interacted with the kids. There was a gentle humility in her approach, the same attitude he had observed in the cafe. She spoke softly but with conviction, giving each child personal attention. He noticed how she praised their smallest victories, never rushing them, each success met with a smile that lit up her entire face. In this snug reading room, Lily was the sun, and the children soaked up her warmth. Soon, one of the older girls piped up. "Who are you?" she asked David, eyeing the tall newcomer warily. Before Ms. Burns could answer, David leaned forward slightly. "I'm just visiting," he said gently. "I might volunteer here too if you'll have me. I'm Dave." He decided to shorten his name. Less formal, less chance of Lily connecting the dots to the bigger persona behind David Harrington. "Cool," said the girl, then turned back to Lily, apparently satisfied. The kids were more comfortable around Lily, who resumed teaching them about contractions and possessives. David realized how different these lessons were from the high-level board meetings he was used to. Here, the decision-making involved picking which storybook to read next or how to explain the difference between there and there. At the end of the session, Ms. Burns encouraged Lily to pack up. "We'll close up in 30 minutes, she noted, "so feel free to finish up any last notes." The children scurried off to gather their backpacks, chatter filling the hallway. Lily began stacking the worn textbooks and worksheets. David drifted closer, unsure how to break the silence that settled between them. She glanced at him, looking vaguely puzzled but still polite. "You did great," he said softly. "The kids really respond to you." "Thank you," Lily replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "They're wonderful to work with. Most of them just need a bit of extra attention and someone to believe they can do it." David nodded. "It's impressive. Not everyone has the patience or the heart for this." Her cheeks colored faintly. I want them to grow up loving words, you know? Books, stories. It made a difference in my life, so maybe it'll do the same for them." He wanted to say more, how he'd seen her compassion firsthand in the cafe, how that moment had touched him, but he held back. He could sense she still couldn't place him, and a part of him wasn't quite ready to declare, "I'm that stranger whose breakfast you paid for." There was also the complicated tangle of his real identity as a powerful CEO. Better to stay in the background for now, learning what he could, seeing how the Redwood Community Center worked, then figuring out the best way to help. "It's good to meet you," David said again, offering a more genuine smile. "Maybe I'll see you around." "You too," Lily murmured. She paused as if on the verge of saying something else, but ended up merely returning his smile. Then she carried the stack of books to a nearby shelf. He took that as his cue to drift away. Before he left, Ms. Burns caught up with him near the door, nearly breathless. "So Dave, do you think you'll come back?" David didn't hesitate. "Absolutely, I'd like to volunteer regularly if that's all right. I just need to confirm my schedule." "That's terrific," Ms. Burns said, clapping her hands together. "We've got kids here practically every day after school. Maybe I'll pair you with Lily next time." "That would be great," he replied, feeling a strange rush of eagerness that he quickly tried to mask behind a neutral expression. As he departed, walking through the center's quiet halls and out into the early evening light, David's mind brimmed with unspoken possibilities. He wasn't entirely sure how this second encounter with Lily would shape the days to come, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't simply vanish from her world, not when she'd shown him that there was more to life than the corporate climb. Her quiet empathy had cut through the noise of profit margins and expansions. And now, in stepping into her realm, this humble place of used furniture and donated books, he'd never felt more alive. In the parking lot, he climbed into his car, took one last look at the red brick community center behind him, and drove off. His phone buzzed with notifications from Harrington Innovations. Investors needed updates, overseas partners demanded negotiations. But for once, David wasn't in a hurry to jump into that chaos. He was thinking about Lily, how her small act of kindness had nudged him in a direction he never would have predicted. If life were a story, he thought as he merged onto the busy street, Lily was a page he was meant to read. And he was only just beginning to discover what that page held. The following Saturday morning dawned crisp and sunny, a rare break from the week's drizzly chill. Lily woke earlier than usual, fueled by her eagerness to reach the community center before the kids arrived. She'd promised a special reading circle, complete with silly voices and character cutouts, to encourage shy readers. Her tiny apartment was still cold when she dressed in a simple navy sweater and jeans. She double-checked her satchel to make sure she had enough paper crowns for her princess and pirate lesson. By the time Lily hopped off the bus near Redwood Community Center, the air was fresh with the promise of a day unburdened by adult worries. The building was quieter on weekends without the usual after-school rush. Only a handful of children would be there, the ones whose parents worked Saturdays or whose guardians needed the respite. Lily took a moment to wave at a couple of kids on the swing set out front. They brightened at the sight of her, calling her name, and she answered with an enthusiastic hello. Inside the center's volunteer lounge, really just a narrow room with a worn couch, smelled of coffee and vanilla air freshener. Ms. Burns stood near the counter, stirring powdered creamer into a mug. She greeted Lily with a wide grin. "You're early, dear. Then again, you're always early." Lily set her satchel down. "Busy day, I guess. I have some new activities planned. Pirates and princesses with reading comprehension hidden inside the fun." She paused, rummaging through a plastic bag. "Look, paper crowns for them to decorate, and these cardboard eye patches for the pirate part." Ms. Burns laughed, stirring her coffee. "Brilliant idea. They'll love it. And guess who else is planning to join us today?" Lily looked up curiously. "Who?" "That new volunteer, Dave. He sent me an email late last night to confirm. He's never been to our Saturday sessions before, but he sounded enthusiastic." Ms. Burns sipped her coffee with a secretive little smile. "He's quite punctual, that one. Bet you he'll show up within the hour." At the mention of his name, Lily's mind jumped back to the man with the neat button-down shirt who'd appeared midweek. He had that faint hint of familiarity she couldn't shake. She recalled the gentle way he'd spoken to the kids, though he'd mostly observed from the sidelines. Something in the warmth of his eyes had lingered with her afterward. She still couldn't place where she had seen him before, but there was a gnawing suspicion. Lily shrugged it off, reminding herself that it hardly mattered. She was simply glad for the extra help. She carried her supplies to the reading room, where she spent a few minutes setting up. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the colorful posters on the walls. She arranged chairs in a semicircle, a small stage at the front for story time. With everything in place, she crouched down to fine-tune the accessories. Paper crowns, star-shaped stickers, crayons. That's when the door at the far side opened, and a familiar voice spoke softly. "Need a hand with anything?" Lily glanced up. David, stood there, a slight smile on his face. He was dressed casually again, a neatly pressed shirt and dark jeans, carrying a simple backpack instead of the sleek satchel he'd had last time. He wore an expression that mingled polite caution with genuine enthusiasm, as though he were stepping into unfamiliar territory once more. And in truth, he was. This place still felt worlds away from his usual environment of glass offices and corporate jargon. She rose, brushing imaginary dust off her knees. "Hi, Dave. Sure. Could you maybe help me set out the worksheets?" of course." He moved closer, and for a moment they both stood awkwardly, not entirely sure how to start the conversation. Lily handed him a small stack of papers. They were titled Pirates versus Princesses, Reading Fun, with short paragraphs for the kids to practice reading aloud. David glanced at the text, smiling. "Looks fun. You wrote this yourself?" She shrugged, a little shy. "Yeah, just a few lines. I like mixing up the reading with something playful. Helps them stay interested." He nodded, distributing the sheets onto each child's chair. While he worked, Lily kept glancing at him, half expecting some spark to trigger her memory definitively. She couldn't forget that flicker of recollection the last time they met. He might have been someone she passed by in the neighborhood, yet her instincts insisted there was more to it than that. The puzzle remained unsolved. Ms. Burns poked her head in, letting them know the kids were arriving. In a matter of minutes, 5 children bounded through the door, each finding a seat. One of them, Mia, squealed at the sight of the paper crowns, making Lily laugh. Another child, Jorge, grabbed a cardboard eye patch and declared, "R!" in his best pirate voice. David watched, momentarily dazzled by the children's unfiltered excitement. He'd attended countless seminars and product launches where people wore plastic smiles and made polite small talk, but nothing compared to the genuine joy that shone in a child's eyes over something as simple as a paper crown and a pretend sword. Lily began handing out crayons, explaining that today they'd be reading a short story about a princess who teamed up with a pirate to find hidden treasure. Each child got to choose which role they wanted to perform when it was time to read out loud. "Dave," Lily said, turning to him with a playful grin, "would you like to be the pirate or the princess in our read-along?" He chuckled, slightly flustered but game. I think I'll stick with pirate, if that's okay. I'm not sure I can pull off a royal wave." "Suit yourself," Lily teased. "But you might have to do the pirate accent. The kids will expect it." "Pirate accent," he repeated, feigning seriousness. I'll do me best." His voice dipped dramatically, causing the children to giggle. The next hour felt like a sparkling moment out of time. Lily guided the kids through the reading, pausing for them to guess at new words or practice tricky pronunciations. David found himself perched on a low chair, reading the lines of Captain Crossbones, a kindly pirate, in a playful, exaggerated grumble that the children found hilarious. Whenever one of them stumbled on a word, Lily gently helped them sound it out, praising each attempt. And each time she glanced at David, she saw him smile in encouragement. At one point, Mia, crowned and giggling, read the princess's lines in a tiny but confident voice. "We must set sail for the Diamond Reef," she declared, waving an imaginary sword. The group erupted in applause when she finished her paragraph without a single slip. Lily quickly scribbled a star on Mia's worksheet and complimented her reading. David joined in with applause and gave Mia a high five. Watching Lily interact, David felt an inexplicable surge of admiration. She wasn't just nice, she had a gift for uplifting others. He saw it in how the shyest boy, Terrence, slowly relaxed under her reassuring tone, eventually mustering the bravery to read aloud. He saw it in how the group didn't just follow instructions but participated eagerly, as though they trusted Lily to make every activity an adventure. This was a woman who poured kindness into every word. By the session's end, Ms. Burns ducked in once again, praising Lily's approach. "You always knock it out of the park, dear," she said. "And Dave, well done on your first full reading session." The kids looked thrilled. He smiled, feeling a bit of boyish pride. "I enjoyed it too." The children headed for the door, carrying their newly colored crowns and eye patches, chattering about how next time they wanted a bigger treasure map or a sea monster cameo. Lily and David picked up the stray crayons and worksheets left behind. Ms. Burns busied herself with something in the hall, leaving them alone in the colorful reading room. As Lily slid the last of the worksheets into a neat pile, David cleared his throat. "I can see why you devote so much time here," he said, voice quiet. "It's special." She glanced up, eyes warm. "Yeah, it's my favorite place in the world. Hard work sometimes, but the reward is seeing them learn, grow, even if it's just baby steps." He nodded slowly. "I imagine the center doesn't have unlimited resources, though." Her smile dimmed slightly. "No, not really. We rely on donations and a small local grant. Some months, Ms. Burns struggles to pay for basic supplies." Lily shrugged, as though accustomed to this reality. "But we make do. The community helps. And I pitch in a bit when I can, though I don't have much either." David's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her who he really was. Explain that he not only had the means to help, but also the power to ensure Redwood Community Center never worried about funding again. Yet, staring into her earnest eyes, he also sensed that if he revealed too much too soon, it might change how she viewed him. Right now, she saw him as Dave, a well-meaning volunteer. If he donned the mask of David Harrington, wealthy CEO, would the warmth in her eyes remain the same, or would it cloud with doubt, overshadowed by the roles that money and status often played in other people's lives? He decided to hold his tongue a bit longer. "I'm sure you do a lot. I can tell your heart's in it." Before she could respond, Ms. Burns poked her head back inside, beckoning Lily to the hallway. "Hey, Lily, we've got a parent looking for a rideshare for one of the kids. Could you help sort it out?" "Sure," Lily replied, gathering her things. She glanced at David. "It was nice working with you today." "You too," he said, and he meant it wholeheartedly. She slipped out, and David collected his backpack. A swirl of emotions contended inside him: admiration for Lily's selfless dedication, frustration at the thought of her struggling financially, curiosity about her life outside this center. He also couldn't ignore that seeing her again fanned a spark of personal warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Slowly, David made his way toward the front of the center. Children were still scampering around, parents chatting in clusters. A few kids recognized him, calling him Mr. Pirate, with shy waves. He returned their greeting, realizing that, in their eyes, he was simply someone who cared about their stories and their success with words. The knowledge moved him more than he would have imagined. He stepped outside into the bright midday sunshine. The playground squeaks and laughter filled the air, tangling with the faint hum of weekend traffic. David exhaled, pulling his car keys from his pocket. He'd have to head back to his penthouse soon. His phone was no doubt brimming with missed calls and messages about the newest product launch, the next big meeting. But something felt different. The life he always knew was still there, but now it coexisted with this simpler realm of paper crowns, reading circles, and Lily's gentle smile. He climbed into his car, noticing how out of place it looked against the center's aging brick facade. Yet, as he pulled onto the street, he resolved that Redwood Community Center wouldn't remain underfunded and overshadowed for long. He might not reveal himself today or even tomorrow, but soon enough, David Harrington was going to make a difference in this small, bright world that Lily held so dear. After all, he owed her something immeasurable. She had unknowingly awakened a part of him he'd long buried under the weight of corporate ambition. And if there was one thing David excelled at, it was following through on a promise, even if it was one he'd made only to himself. The following week brought a flurry of changes to both Lily and David's lives, though neither could have imagined just how deeply their worlds were about to entwine. Lily's library shifts became increasingly hectic as budget cuts loomed. More patrons were coming in for free internet access, job searches, and local resource guides. She hardly found a moment to breathe between shelving books and helping anxious newcomers figure out how to fill out online applications. On top of that, Redwood Community Center put out a call for extra volunteers for a weekend fair, and Lily, ever ready to help, signed up without hesitation. David, on the other hand, found himself juggling two realities. By day, he was the sharp-witted CEO at Harrington Innovations. Conference calls, product rollouts, and a tense standoff with a potential investor filled his hours. By night, He pored over the philanthropic proposals he'd demanded from his foundation department. Everything he read felt large-scale: grand scholarship funds, broad policy recommendations, glitzy galas designed more for PR than sincere impact. But David didn't want a black-tie banquet or a ceremony that put his name on a plaque. He wanted to effect real change in Redwood's modest halls. One evening, after a marathon meeting about an international expansion, he retreated to his penthouse living room. High above the city, he couldn't escape the hum of traffic. He flipped through digital documents on his tablet, reading about Redwood Community Center's financial constraints. They had a shoestring budget that paid for a handful of part-time staff and scant supplies. Meanwhile, Lily and Ms. Burns kept everything afloat through sheer determination and the goodwill of local donors. The center's monthly shortfall was shockingly small by his standards. David had lost more money in a single hour on ill-fated stock dips than Redwood needed for a year of children's programs. He scrolled to a spreadsheet summarizing Redwood's needs: new books, computers, minor renovations to the battered reading room furniture. The total was an amount he could pay out of his personal account today and barely notice. Yet he hesitated. He felt a tug of conflict. If he simply wrote them a check in Harrington Innovations' name, the entire center might suddenly see him not as Dave the volunteer, but as a wealthy benefactor with corporate ties. Worse, Lily might question his motives or feel overshadowed. The last thing he wanted was to extinguish that bright sincerity in her eyes by turning their warm volunteer connection into a business transaction. After a moment, David set his tablet aside. He needed a plan that would help Redwood quietly, without upending the delicate trust Lily had in him. Perhaps there was a way for Harrington Innovations to support Redwood from behind the scenes: anonymous donations, a small philanthropic arm that didn't trumpet his name. He decided to talk to his CFO and philanthropic advisors the next day, searching for subtle solutions. At the library, Lily was hunched over a stack of returned books, scanning each one carefully. She winced at the sight of dog-eared pages and coffee stains. The library's older scanner beeped irritably each time a barcode was unrecognized, forcing Lily to type in lengthy reference numbers. She was tired. Her ankle still twinged from the twist she'd suffered during a rainy walk home the week before. But she pushed through. Just a few more hours and she'd head to Redwood for her volunteer shift with the kids. A gentle voice broke her concentration. It was Mr. Price, an elderly regular who spent hours at the library reading ancient newspapers and scouring genealogical records. "Dear," he said kindly, "take a moment to breathe. You look run down." Lily smiled, feeling warmth toward the kindly patron. "Oh, I'm okay, Mr. Price. It's just busy these days." He tapped his cane softly on the floor. Busy is one thing, overworked is another. After a pause, he added, "You always help me find my records. Is there anything I can do to help you?" She shook her head. "Not really, but thank you." She didn't add that her rent was steadily climbing or that her hours at the library might get cut if the city council didn't approve the next funding cycle. She just couldn't bring herself to burden anyone else with that. Her motto was always to help, not ask for help. Around midweek, Ms. Burns called Lily at the library, excitement evident in her voice. "I just got news from a local sponsor," she gushed. "They said a private donor approached them with an interest in Redwood's programs. Apparently they want to talk with us about some improvements. Isn't that amazing?" Lily's eyes went wide. "That's wonderful," she responded, scanning a book about photography. "Did they give a name?" "No name," Ms. Burns said, voice wavering between curiosity and delight. "Whoever they are, they've requested anonymity for now. The sponsor said they might fund some renovations to our reading area and maybe even get us better computers for the older kids' tutoring. It's everything we've been dreaming about, Lily." A swirl of joy and bewilderment welled up in Lily's chest. Someone out there cared enough to want to help Redwood in a big way? "It sounds almost too good to be true," she murmured, still hugging a reference book to her side. "But I hope it's real." "We'll meet them soon," Ms. Burns promised. "There's talk of a meeting in the next couple of weeks. Cross your fingers." After hanging up, Lily felt a strange, giddy hope. Her mind returned to the conversation she'd had with Dave, how he'd asked about the center's funding issues. Could he be? She shook her head at the absurd notion that the mild-mannered volunteer was also a wealthy donor. He seemed nice, but he came off more as a regular office worker than a philanthropist. Probably just a coincidence, she decided, all the while smiling to herself. Maybe Redwood was finally catching a lucky break. For David, orchestrating the anonymous donation through a small philanthropic partner was harder than he'd anticipated, mainly because Harrington Innovations had an established process for all charity efforts, one that always ended with splashy PR. He had to navigate around that, ensuring no press releases or photo ops. He found a discreet local sponsor who specialized in refurbishing community spaces. The sponsor owed him a favor, so David quietly arranged for them to approach Redwood. His only request was that his involvement remain hidden. Sitting in his office that same afternoon, David stared at the city skyline. He'd just gotten word that Redwood's staff were excited about the potential improvements. He could practically imagine Lily's face lighting up, that sweet mixture of relief and enthusiasm. The mental image gave him more satisfaction than landing any corporate deal in recent memory. Still, an edge of worry nagged him. Sooner or later, Lily might discover the truth about him. Would she feel betrayed by his half-truths and secrets? He was pulled from his thoughts by a knock on the door. Marjorie, his assistant, wearing a sympathetic expression. "Mr. Harrington, you have the West Coast partners waiting on a video call. They're running behind schedule, but they're ready now." David nodded. "All right, let's get this done." He turned away from the window, steeling himself for the corporate realm he had mastered long ago. Saturday arrived, the day of Redwood Community Center's small fair, a fundraiser with homemade goods, face painting, and simple carnival games. It was a chance for families and neighbors to gather while supporting the center's programs. Lily arrived early, arms loaded with craft supplies to make the face painting booth more festive. She was delighted to see the courtyard filled with tables covered in tablecloths and bright signs. Bake sale, arts and crafts, used books. Ms. Burns greeted her, wearing a vibrant scarf and a clipboard in hand. "Hey, Lily. We need volunteers to help with the ring toss. Could you manage that after you're done with face painting?" "Sure," Lily said, spotting a line of kids already awaiting her colorful brush. "I'll do face painting for a while, then head over." She set up quickly. Glitter, non-toxic paints, little stencils for butterflies and tigers. Soon, children were bouncing up to her in excitement, asking for silly faces. She lost track of time, immersed in the joy of transforming giggling kids into sparkly-eyed creatures. Her jeans got splattered with paint, but she couldn't care less. This was her happy place. In the midst of that, a familiar voice spoke over her shoulder. "Need a hand with the scaly lizard designs?" She glanced back, brush in hand, and found Dave standing there. He was dressed in casual clothes again, wearing a gentle half-smile. Warmth flooded Lily. "Hey, I didn't know you'd be here." He shrugged. "I wanted to help out. Ms. Burns said they could use more volunteers, so here I am." He nodded at the painting station. "I'm not exactly Michelangelo, but I can fill in some green if that's what you need." She laughed, stepping aside so he could see the small selection of stencils. "Let's start you off easy. Maybe a star or a flower. Lizard scales might be next-level artistry for you." He dutifully sat beside her, picking up a brush. Soon, they were working side by side, painting small arms and cheeks with bright, playful designs. The children, thrilled by the double attention, kept the pair busy. Lily marveled at David's willingness to jump in. He was a bit awkward at first, holding a kid's hand as though it might break, but after a few tries he adapted, painting with genuine focus. She noticed how gentle he was, how he never rushed a child or dismissed their frantic, imaginative requests. One little girl wanted a neon green dragon on her cheek, and David tried his best, apologizing for the wobbly lines. The girl loved it. Between face paints, Lily snuck glances at him, that persistent feeling of familiarity tugging at her. Something about the shape of his jaw or the sound of his voice, like a faint echo from a morning not long ago when she'd done something spontaneously kind for a stranger. She was half tempted to ask if he'd ever visited a certain cafe, but each time she opened her mouth to speak, another kid arrived, demanding a princess tiara or a superhero lightning bolt. By midday, they'd painted at least 24 children. Ms. Burns urged Lily to take a quick break and check on the ring toss booth. "I'll hold down the fort here," David promised, rummaging in her paint kit for more sparkles. "Go see if they need an extra set of hands." Lily stood, flexing her cramped fingers, and nodded. "Thanks. Be right back." Weaving through the fair, she passed the bake sale, rows of cupcakes, brownies, and pies. Volunteers were calling out prices, with all proceeds going to the community center. The ring toss booth sat near the edge of the courtyard, where children lined up to throw rings at bright plastic bottles. Laughter and squeals echoed, mixing with the sugary smell of cotton candy. Lily spotted Terrence, the shy boy from the reading group, carefully aiming a ring. His dad stood beside him, cheering him on softly. Lily's heart warmed at the sight, but halfway there she froze. Because across the courtyard, near the bake sale, she glimpsed a man stepping out of a sleek black car. He wore a tailored suit, and though she couldn't see his face clearly, something about his silhouette reminded her of someone. Her breath caught. Was that the same man from the cafe, from that morning she'd paid for a stranger's breakfast? She couldn't be sure. He disappeared behind a group of chatting neighbors. Lily shook her head, feeling ridiculous. That had been weeks ago. There was no reason for that stranger to show up here. She chalked it up to an overactive imagination, possibly triggered by seeing Dave and feeling that same nagging sense. She continued to the ring toss booth, chalking her sudden jolt of recognition up to coincidence. Even so, she couldn't quite rid herself of the questions that tugged at her mind. Was she mixing up two different people? Could Dave and that frantic businessman be connected somehow? Or was it just that she longed to believe her small gesture of kindness had sown seeds that might bloom in unexpected ways? Meanwhile, the man in the tailored suit, David's CFO, had arrived to discreetly scope out Redwood's fundraiser as per David's private request. She carried no corporate identification. She was merely a curious potential sponsor. Following David's instructions, she wore her best friendly local demeanor to assess Redwood's scale and talk to Ms. Burns about their plans. Little did Lily know how close she'd come to discovering David's behind-the-scenes involvement. The CFO blended into the crowd, collecting intel, ensuring the donation plan remained on track, all under David Harrington's discreet guidance. And across the fair, painting kids' faces, Dave was blissfully unaware that his CFO had just arrived. He focused on making each child laugh, carefully applying paint to form hearts or claws or shimmering unicorn horns. In quiet moments, he glanced around, hoping to spot Lily. He found he missed her presence, even if she'd only been gone a few minutes. As the fair bustled on, all those hidden connections, anonymous donations, half-remembered meetings, disguised intentions, began to weave together in Redwood's busy courtyard. The sun shone brightly, and laughter rang out, overshadowing the secrets that hovered, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Lily laughed with the children, Dave poured his heart into volunteering, and Redwood's staff felt that intangible promise of better days ahead. None of them realized that the seeds of a profound change were already sprouting beneath the cheerful chaos. A faint buzz of excitement lingered long after the fair ended. By the time Lily and the other volunteers finished cleaning up the booths, folding the tables and sweeping away stray cupcake crumbs, the evening sky glowed with oranges and purples. Children tugged tired parents by the hand, departing with faces still speckled by paint, while Redwood's staff conferred happily about how the fair had exceeded their modest expectations. Ms. Burns counted the collected donations twice, almost disbelieving the final tally, significantly more than last year. As Lily helped roll away a cart of leftover craft supplies, Dave slipped in to step beside her, gently taking a box from her arms when he noticed she was already carrying two. "Thanks," she said, flashing a grateful smile. "I didn't realize how heavy these markers and paints would be together." "You've been juggling them all day," he pointed out. "The least I can do is carry one box." They maneuvered around a few stray folding chairs and into the community center's storage room. Inside, it smelled of old cardboard and paint. Tall shelves lined each wall, stacked with random donations, board games with missing pieces, dusty textbooks, and half-finished crafts. Lily set down her boxes on a clear patch of floor. Dave carefully placed his own box on top. The overhead light flickered slightly, drawing their attention. Lily gave it a mild frown. "I've been meaning to replace that bulb. We never have enough in the budget to do more than the basics. I guess we just got used to a few quirks around here." She spoke with a mixture of pride and resignation, as though Redwood's limitations were a badge of endurance. Dave pursed his lips, thinking how easily a modest donation could fix something as simple as proper lighting. Not wanting to betray his thoughts, he forced a casual nod. At the far end of the room, Ms. Burns's cheerful voice drifted in from the hallway. She was apparently guiding a visitor through the center. "Yes, we're thrilled with how today went," Ms. Burns was saying. "We're always grateful for any support. Let me show you the reading room, one of our most active spaces." Lily's head perked at the mention of a visitor, but she heard footsteps receding, so she turned back to Dave. "Anyway, thank you for all your help. The kids had a blast with the face painting. You're a natural." He chuckled. "I think I used enough green to paint an entire forest on them, but it was fun. I haven't really done anything like that. Ever, actually." She tilted her head. "Not even as a kid?" He paused, carefully wording his reply. "I guess I was always busy." Lily studied his face in the dim light. There it was again, an air of mystery that teased her every time. Who was Dave, really? She'd gleaned a few details. He was polite, well-spoken, clearly comfortable in a professional environment. But he never talked about family, about his job, about any personal struggles. It struck her that for all his gentle involvement, she knew almost nothing about him. A comedic crash from out in the hall interrupted them. Someone had likely knocked over a stack of chairs. They exchanged amused looks, stepping out of the storage room to see if help was needed. The next morning, Lily awoke feeling a pleasant fatigue, the kind that comes from a day well spent. She brewed a small pot of coffee in her old drip machine, using the last scoop of grounds she could afford until her next paycheck. As she sipped the lukewarm coffee, her mind wandered to the fair's success and to Dave's easy laughter as he painted hearts on little kids' cheeks. She found herself smiling into her mug without quite realizing it. Then her phone buzzed, dragging her attention away from the memory. It was Ms. Burns again, speaking rapidly. "Lily, I just heard from the sponsor's representative, the private donor who's been asking about Redwood. They want to come by the center tomorrow morning for a more thorough inspection. I know it's short notice, but can you be there? I think your perspective on the reading room would be super helpful." "Tomorrow?" Lily glanced at her calendar. She had a library shift in the early afternoon, but her morning was technically free. "I can make that work, yeah." "Oh, perfect," Ms. Burns sighed in relief. "Thank you. I'll have coffee and donuts ready for them. They said they wanted to remain mostly anonymous, but apparently they have some real plans to help us renovate. Fingers crossed." "Absolutely. I'll be there," Lily promised, unable to tamp down her own rising excitement. David had a slightly different morning. Arriving at Harrington Innovations, he breezed through the glass doors into a marble-floored lobby. Executives and assistants scurried around, clutching folders, eyes averted to avoid stepping into his path. He greeted several employees by name. He was never one to ignore the staff, but kept moving briskly. When he reached his private elevator, he found his CFO, Ms. Wilcox, waiting with a neutral expression. She was the same woman who had discreetly visited Redwood's fundraiser. He'd asked her to blend in, but he could tell from the faint arch of her eyebrow that it had been a curious experience. "Morning," he greeted. "Morning, Mr. Harrington," she said, stepping into the elevator with him. "I have some notes from the Redwood Fair as per your request." The elevator doors slid shut, and she handed him a slim folder. Inside were brief observations about Redwood's facilities, overall attendance, staff enthusiasm, and, most importantly, cost estimates for upgrades. David flipped through the pages, quietly nodding. "And the meeting?" he asked. "They set it up already?" "Yes. Tomorrow morning, Ms. Burns is expecting someone from the sponsor to visit. They've assigned me to go on behalf of the foundation partner. You'll remain anonymous, as you requested." "Good," he murmured, scanning the numbers. "Make sure they get a fair assessment. Redwood needs those renovations sooner rather than later, especially the reading room and general structural fixes. The roof could use some patching, too." Ms. Wilcox tilted her head. "You've never been this hands-on about a local donation before, sir." He offered a faint shrug, still reading. "This one's personal. I want it done right. No red tape, no photo ops, no brand logos plastered everywhere." She pursed her lips, but nodded. "Understood." When the elevator opened onto the executive floor, Ms. Wilcox exited first. David stayed behind for a moment, lingering in the sleek interior, eyes tracing the folder's data. His heart thumped with a hint of anticipation. If everything went well, Redwood could be under renovation in a matter of weeks. He pictured Lily's reaction, her joy at finally having the resources she deserved for those kids. He squared his shoulders and stepped out, carefully masking his excitement. The corridor ahead swarmed with employees and visitors, eager to catch a moment of his time. But David's thoughts were across town, drifting toward that humble reading nook and a volunteer with a heart big enough to paint sparkles on every child's face. Monday morning arrived, bringing an unusual hush to Redwood Community Center. It was too early for most of the kids. Only a few staff members milled about. Ms. Burns fussed over a box of donuts on a small table in the lobby, setting out paper cups for coffee. Lily hovered nearby, smoothing her hair and adjusting the collar of her blouse, feeling oddly nervous. "You look fine," Ms. Burns teased, noticing Lily's fidgeting. "These people want to see the center, not a fashion show." Lily laughed self-consciously. "I know, but this might be a big deal, right?" Just then, the front doors opened. In walked Ms. Wilcox, though of course Lily didn't know her name, accompanied by two other individuals in business attire. They exchanged cordial greetings with Ms. Burns, who introduced Lily as one of Redwood's most dedicated volunteers. Lily offered a handshake, which Ms. Wilcox accepted politely. "Thank you for meeting us," Ms. Wilcox said, scanning the center's modest lobby with a practiced eye. She introduced her colleagues as consultants. "We'll just have a quick look around, chat about your needs." "Of course," Ms. Burns replied, leading them forward. "I thought we'd start with the reading area since that's our biggest program, then move on to the multi-purpose room." Lily walked beside them, heart fluttering. She felt slightly out of place among professionals in suits, but she summoned her courage to speak. When they reached the reading room, familiar pastel shelves, battered chairs, the same flickering light overhead, Ms. Wilcox asked for Lily's perspective. "Well," Lily began, clearing her throat, "a lot of the furniture is donated and it's not ergonomically ideal. Kids spend hours here and some chairs are wobbly. We'd love to have small, sturdy tables too. Right now we have a limited number of tablets for older kids who do online reading exercises, and they're pretty outdated." Ms. Wilcox nodded, scribbling notes on a tablet. "I see. And the books themselves?" "A lot are second-hand. Some are quite worn, missing pages. We do what we can, But new sets of leveled readers would be a dream, Lily said, voice brightening with hope. And if we had a few more computers, we could expand digital literacy programs for older kids. Ms. Wilcox traded a glance with her associates. That's doable. We'll look at the budget for replacements. Also, I assume you need structural improvements. She pointed at the faint water stain near the corner of the ceiling. Ms. Burns sighed. Yes, that's a roof leak we patch up every few months. The group walked around, Ms. Wilcox snapping photos with her phone, the consultants measuring certain areas. Lily answered all their questions, from how many children used the reading room daily to the sorts of supplies they lacked. Despite her nerves, she was earnest, painting a vivid picture of Redwood's day-to-day reality. When they finished touring, Ms. Wilcox smiled. Thank you for your time, Lily, Ms. Burns. We have enough information to move forward. I'll speak with our sponsor and see what can be arranged. Ms. Burns clasped her hands together. That's wonderful. We can't thank you enough. Lily sensed a tingle of cautious optimism in the air. We'd be incredibly grateful for any help, truly. The entourage made their way back to the lobby, where Ms. Burns insisted they take a donut on the house. Lily hovered, curiosity eating at her. She ventured. Do you know if the sponsor is a local person or a company? Ms. Wilcox gave a practiced, reassuring smile. They prefer to remain private, but I can assure you they have the best intentions for Redwood. And with that, they left as swiftly as they had arrived, leaving Lily and Ms. Burns in a haze of wonder. They seemed very thorough, Ms. Burns said, almost breathless. This could be huge, Lily. Lily nodded, adrenaline coursing through her. A new roof, new books, maybe even new technology. It was more than she'd ever dared hope for Redwood. In the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that Dave had seemed so invested in Redwood's finances. Could he be part of this grand gesture, somehow orchestrating it? The thought felt both impossible and strangely plausible, yet Lily pushed the speculation aside. Whether Dave was behind it or not, Redwood might soon have the resources to expand its reading programs, fix the flickering lights, and support more children. She headed to the library that afternoon with a bounce in her step, barely feeling the ache in her ankle. A powerful sense of hope had taken hold. That evening, after finishing a grueling round of calls with international partners, David sat alone in his penthouse office. The city lights twinkled below as he rubbed the tension from his temples. A short text from Ms. Wilcox confirmed that the Redwood visit had been promising. Lily and Ms. Burns had explained the center's needs thoroughly. Everything was on track for a formal funding proposal. Swiveling his chair to face the window, David gazed at the horizon. He imagined Redwood's reading room transformed. New shelves, bright books, stable chairs for kids to settle in. He pictured Lily, her face glowing as she watched a child read from a crisp new page rather than a torn second-hand copy. The notion filled him with a warmth that eclipsed any corporate triumph he'd felt in years. Yet a niggling thought persisted. How long could he keep his identity hidden? Redwood's transformation would be too big to hide forever, and Lily, her genuine, caring spirit, deserved the truth. He just couldn't shake the fear that the moment he revealed himself, she might withdraw or question his sincerity. For now, he chose to let things play out. Redwood needed him to move quickly but quietly. Once the renovations were underway, maybe then he'd tell Lily everything, or maybe he'd find a way to keep wearing the mask of Dave, the unassuming volunteer, just a little while longer. In the hush of his lofty home, he let his mind wander to simpler things. Lily's gentle laughter, the childlike wonder she inspired in the reading room. A vow formed in his chest. Redwood would get the best. The kids would have a space that nurtured their imagination, and Lily would finally see that sometimes, when you give kindness to a stranger, the universe answers back with miracles you never expected. Lily clutched the worn strap of her tote bag as she hurried across the library lobby. Her lunch break was almost over, and she was due back at her station to assist patrons. Yet her mind kept drifting to Redwood Community Center, replaying every word Ms. Wilcox and her associates had said. Could the center truly be on the verge of a major upgrade? Lily had spent the last few days mentally compiling lists of possible improvements, everything from fresh coats of paint to new books, computers, and comfortable chairs. She was so lost in her thoughts that she nearly collided with Mr. Price, the elderly patron who favored genealogical research. He gave a startled jump, nearly dropping his file of family records. "Oh, Mr. Price, I'm sorry." Lily steadied him gently. "Are you okay?" He chuckled, patting her hand. "I'm fine, my dear, but you seem a bit flustered. Everything all right?" Lily nodded hastily. "Yes, there's a lot going on at the community center. Good things, I hope." "Ah," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You do glow a bit when you mention that place. I do hope all goes well. Anything I can do to help?" She smiled, touched by his concern. "Not at the moment, but thank you." With that, she excused herself, slipping behind the circulation desk. The day's tasks demanded her attention, but her heart buzzed with optimism for the center's future. That afternoon, Lily arrived at Redwood earlier than usual, hoping to catch Ms. Burns before the after-school rush. Inside, she found the coordinator pacing near the front desk, phone pressed to her ear, wearing an expression torn between excitement and apprehension. Yes, of course," Ms. Burns said into the phone. "We can make that work. Next Thursday? Certainly." A pause. "Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you again." Ending the call, Ms. Burns looked up and spotted Lily. "Great news!" she exclaimed. "The sponsors team wants to finalize the renovation details soon. They'll be sending over a formal proposal next week. It's all happening so fast." "That's amazing," Lily breathed, struggling to keep her voice down. A few kids were doing homework nearby and she didn't want to distract them. "How soon could they start?" Ms. Burns shrugged, practically vibrating with excitement. "Potentially next month. They'll sort out the budget for roof repairs, new furniture, maybe even brand new books." Her gaze shone with happy disbelief. "They also asked about expanding our reading programs, maybe hiring a part-time instructor so that volunteers like you aren't overworked." Lily's heart soared. A part-time instructor would mean more structured lessons, and maybe she wouldn't have to scramble to prep everything alone. She folded her arms around herself, as though hugging the joy that threatened to spill over. Far across town, in the sleek boardroom of Harrington Innovations, David sat through a lengthy budget meeting. PowerPoint slides illuminated the darkened room, showing bar graphs and profit margins. Executives droned on about cost-cutting measures and international expansions. David kept glancing at his phone under the table, awaiting a message from Ms. Wilcox to confirm Redwood's next steps. His restlessness didn't escape the CFO's notice. When the meeting finally concluded, David lingered behind, feigning interest in a spreadsheet. Ms. Wilcox approached, her professional demeanor never wavering. "Sir, we're on schedule. The formal proposal is almost ready. I spoke with Redwood again, they're thrilled. If all goes smoothly, we can roll out initial renovations by early next month." David exhaled with relief. "Good. Keep me updated." Ms. Wilcox gave a subtle nod. "Of course, Mr. Harrington." Then she lowered her voice. "I do want to remind you, once the improvements start, Redwood staff will likely want to express gratitude. It may be difficult to remain entirely anonymous." He offered a thin smile. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there." In truth, he'd spent countless nights debating how to reconcile his secret involvement with Lily's trust. But each time, he convinced himself that Redwood's welfare took priority over his personal dilemma. The moment of revelation, if it came, would just have to be handled carefully. That weekend, Lily once again dedicated her Saturday to Redwood's reading circle. She arrived to find Dave already there, waiting in the lobby with a small tray of muffins. Her heart did a funny skip at the sight of him. Over the past weeks, their collaboration had become comfortable. quietly slipping into conversation, sharing tasks, and exchanging warm smiles in the hallway. The kids adored having two friendly volunteers, and Lily found herself equally appreciative of Dave's steady presence. "Morning," she greeted him softly. He raised the tray, smiling sheepishly. "I tried baking. Didn't want to come empty-handed. They're not as pretty as a bakery's, but hopefully they taste okay." Lily peeked under the foil, seeing slightly misshapen muffins studded with chocolate chips. A laugh escaped her. "They look great. The kids will love them." He blushed faintly. "I hope so. My first attempt was, well, let's just say I almost set off the smoke alarm." Before Lily could say more, a handful of children bounded in, exclaiming over the muffins. Dave distributed them with a grin, careful to ensure each kid got a fair share. Lily ushered them into the reading room, where she had already set out new worksheets on storytelling basics. Today's theme was "My Magical Creature," encouraging the kids to invent a fantastical animal and describe its powers. As they settled in a circle, Lily gave Dave the opening lines to read. He cleared his throat dramatically, adopting a theatrical tone that made the children giggle. "In a deep mystical forest lived a wondrous creature named—" He paused, arching an eyebrow at the kids. "Let's see. Who has a name?" One boy shouted, "Rocky." Another child yelled, "Dragonella." Dave pretended to weigh both options. "Dragonella it is. Sorry, Rocky. You'll be the sidekick." The room erupted into squeals. Lily watched Dave with unguarded admiration, marveling at how easily he slipped into creative mode, even though he'd once confessed he hadn't done this kind of thing as a child. After the reading segment, Lily and Dave walked around, helping the children draft descriptions of their magical creatures. One child described a water-splashing unicorn with rainbow hooves. Another wrote about a singing lion with two heads. Terrence, the shy boy, wrote about a tiny dragon that breathed glittery sparks instead of fire because it just wanted to make everyone smile. As Lily leaned over Terrence's shoulder, her eyes flicked to Dave, who was animatedly discussing a talking turtle with one of the older kids. She couldn't help that rush of warmth in her chest. With each passing day, she felt more certain that Dave was someone special, though she couldn't define in what way. Was it mere friendship, or was something deeper stirring? When the session ended, the kids darted off to snack time. Lily gathered the papers and crayons. Dave lingered, placing the last muffin wrappers into the trash. Their gazes met, and Lily felt a subtle hitch in her breath. She found herself remembering small moments, his supportive smiles, his rapt attention whenever she explained something about the kids, the way his face softened when a child succeeded in reading a difficult word. She bit her lip, deciding to seize the moment. "Hey Dave, would you like to grab a coffee or something sometime? Outside the center? If you're busy, no worries. I just thought—" She trailed off, cheeks warming. His eyes widened, then his features curved into a gentle smile. "I'd love that," he said simply. "I know a quiet cafe near the park. Maybe tomorrow afternoon?" Her heart fluttered. "Tomorrow works. Around 2? "Perfect," he agreed. They shared a warm silence, hearts thrumming with equal parts anticipation and uncertainty. Then Ms. Burns popped her head in, oblivious to the moment. "Lily, can you help me move some boxes in the storage room?" she asked, scanning the nearly empty reading area. Lily cleared her throat. "Sure." She gave Dave one last smile before following Ms. Burns, feeling inexplicably light-footed. Alone in the reading room, Dave exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. He was both elated and apprehensive about the invitation. For all the comfortable rapport they'd built, she still knew so little about him. About David Harrington. A wave of guilt mingled with happiness. What if meeting outside Redwood led her to ask questions he wasn't ready to answer? Still, he refused to let fear overshadow the fact that Lily wanted to spend time with him. Just them, no kids, no volunteer duties. Maybe he could show her a piece of who he was without destroying the gentle trust between them. Steeling himself, he decided that if she asked, He'd offer some honesty, albeit carefully. The time for half-truths might soon be up. That evening, Lily rummaged through her modest closet, wondering if she owned anything that could pass for nice without implying she was trying too hard. She finally settled on a simple blouse and her best-fitting jeans. Across the room, her phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Burns, a reminder about next week's follow-up with the sponsors team. Lily had nearly forgotten amidst her swirling excitement about coffee with Dave. The potential changes at Redwood felt like a waking dream, as if a benevolent guardian angel was sprinkling hope over their humble halls. She plugged her phone into charge, glancing at her reflection in the mirror. Her thoughts turned to Dave's gentle laugh, the genuine spark in his eyes. She wondered if he had family in the city, if he'd grown up here, or if he'd moved for work. So many questions surfaced when she considered him outside the Redwood setting. She felt a tender curiosity. Who was Dave, truly? The next afternoon arrived with crisp sunshine peeking through scattered clouds. Lily hopped off the bus near the park, feeling a ripple of nerves. She saw Dave waiting by the entrance to a small cafe, hands in his pockets, face brightening when he spotted her. He wore casual clothes again, less office-like than she'd expect from someone so poised. He greeted her with a relaxed smile, ushering her toward the cafe's doors. Inside, the cozy smell of freshly roasted beans enveloped them. They chose a corner table, away from the bustle. For the first few minutes, they chatted about Redwood's fair, the kids' new projects, and Ms. Burns's tireless energy. Then Lily mustered courage, sipping her latte before setting it down. "So, Dave," she began softly, eyes steady. "Tell me about yourself. Outside of Redwood, I mean. What do you do?" He hesitated, swirling the foam in his cup. Each second felt elongated, pregnant with unspoken truths. Finally, he offered a small, cautious smile. I work in corporate management. Nothing too glamorous, lots of spreadsheets, phone calls, that kind of thing." He tried to keep it vague, though it wasn't exactly a lie. She tilted her head. "Is it something you enjoy?" A flicker of conflict crossed his features. "Yes and no. I'm grateful for my job, but sometimes it feels impersonal, you know? Volunteering at Redwood has been a breath of fresh air." She picked up on the earnestness in his words. "I get that. I work at the library and it doesn't pay much, but at least I feel like I'm directly helping people. Redwood's the same. Every hour spent there feels meaningful." Their gazes locked, a silent understanding passing between them. He thought about telling her more, that he wasn't just a manager, but the CEO of a major tech conglomerate. He imagined her reaction, shock, maybe disbelief. But he also feared she might recoil, suspecting his kindness was purely performative. So he only nodded, letting the moment settle. They moved on to lighter topics, favorite childhood books, silly mishaps they'd had in school. Lily spoke about her earliest memory of reading, a battered paperback about a fairy with mismatched wings that she borrowed from the library so many times the cover fell off. Dave listened intently, picturing a younger Lily immersed in stories, shaping the empathetic soul she became. When they finished their drinks, Dave insisted on paying, ignoring her mild protest. They stepped outside, the park stretching before them with tall oaks and winding paths. A breeze carried the scent of fresh grass. Lily, feeling the warmth of the sun on her cheeks, glanced at Dave. The conversation had flowed easily, yet she sensed uncharted depths beneath his calm exterior. "Thank you for the coffee," she said softly. "This was nice." He looked down at her, a gentle fondness in his eyes. "It was. We should do it again." He paused, then added more quietly, "I really enjoy talking with you, Lily." She felt a flurry in her chest. "Me too," she managed, heart quickening. For a moment, the city noise receded, and they stood there, a hint of closeness wrapping around them like a gentle promise. Lily's curiosity about Dave remained, but she didn't press him further. She had seen enough to trust there was goodness in him. Someone who truly cared about Redwood, about children's growth, about simple acts of kindness. If he chose to share more in time, she would welcome it. They parted with a soft goodbye. Lily strolled home, mind awash in warmth, while Dave returned to his penthouse with a quiet smile tugging at his lips. Each had taken a step closer to the other, bridging two vastly different worlds with open hearts. But the secrets and transformations hovering on the horizon would soon test how strong that bridge really was and how brightly kindness could shine when truth finally emerged. That Monday, a renewed buzz filled the Redwood Community Center. Word had spread about the impending sponsorship deal, though only a select few understood the scale. Ms. Burns tried to keep staff and volunteers grounded. Nothing was signed yet, but excitement was hard to contain. Everyone sensed a big change was coming. Lily arrived at the center after her library shift, her spirits high. She passed the main lobby, where she noticed the flickering overhead light had finally gone out altogether, leaving half the area in shadow. She sighed inwardly. For all of Redwood's optimism, the little inconveniences still persisted. The hope that soon, maybe very soon, someone would fix what the center struggled to maintain buoyed her as she headed for the reading room. There, she found Dave carrying in a small box of newly donated books. His face lit up at the sight of her. "Look what Miss Burns found on the donation table," he said, showing her the covers. A few were slightly yellowed, but there were some real gems, classics that kids in the area rarely got to read. I offered to help shelve them. "That's wonderful," Lily said, smiling widely. "And you're here early." He nodded, placing the box on a rickety table. "I had some flexibility at work." His lips twitched into a slightly self-conscious grin. "It's nice to start the week here." She studied him curiously. Something about Dave still felt like an unsolved mystery. He came and went with minimal talk of his job, yet he seemed to be able to arrive at Redwood whenever he pleased, as if no rigid 9-to-5 schedule applied to him. Her suspicions about him being involved in Redwood's sponsorship sometimes resurfaced, but until there was definitive proof, she chose to enjoy his presence rather than question him. She was just grateful for his help, and, truth be told, for the soft warmth in his eyes whenever they locked gazes. Together they took the books out, flipping through them to sort by reading level. The kids would be arriving soon, so Lily arranged them on the shelf closest to the circle area where story time happened. While they worked, they chatted about small things, new library events, Dave's clumsy attempts at baking something else for the kids. Sugar cookies next time, he promised. It felt like a natural, comfortable rhythm. Midway through shelving, Terrence, the shy boy, peered in from the hallway. "Ms. Lily, Mr. Dave," he called quietly. "We got new crayons in the craft room." He held up a fresh, unopened box with wide, delighted eyes. Lily beamed, stepping over to admire the crayons. "Wow, Terrence, look at all those colors. You can make amazing pictures now." "Thanks," he whispered, beaming back before darting away again. Dave chuckled. "He's come a long way from that first day I saw him. He hardly spoke above a whisper." She nodded, recalling Terrence's progress. His mother said Redwood helped him feel safe enough to open up. That's exactly why this place matters so much. He reached for another book, brushing her arm accidentally in the process. Their eyes met, a subtle flicker of shared emotion passing between them. Lily's cheeks warmed and she quickly slid the book onto the shelf. They finished shelving just as Ms. Burns popped her head in, smiling. "I see your extra hands are making a difference," she teased, giving Dave a playful wink. Then, in a more serious tone, she added, "We just got a message from the sponsor's representative. They want to finalize details by the end of the week. If everything aligns, renovations might begin next month." Lily's eyes went wide, excitement fluttering in her chest. She shot a glance at Dave, whose face showed restrained enthusiasm. He gave her a small, knowing nod as if to say, "See? Redwood's future is getting brighter." "That's incredible," Lily breathed. "Ms. Burns, do we need to do anything else to prepare?" Ms. Burns shrugged, barely containing her grin. They might ask for more data about attendance, which programs are most popular, but they're definitely moving forward. I can hardly believe it. Lily clapped her hands lightly in celebration. Across the room, Dave offered a short, private smile, an undercurrent of relief in his eyes that Lily sensed but couldn't interpret. Before she could dwell on it, a new group of children spilled into the reading room, clamoring for story time. Lily and Dave split off to help them settle. In the days that followed, Lily found herself floating on a near-constant high, racing between library duties and Redwood volunteer sessions. If ever she felt weary, she recalled how close the center was to receiving a life-changing investment. Her quiet evenings were spent dreaming of fresh, colorful walls in the reading nook, updated computers, sturdy tables, and a real supply closet instead of random boxes crammed into the storage room. Ms. Burns, too, was aflutter, wanting everything in perfect order before the sponsor's final inspection. She called Lily repeatedly for help sorting attendance logs and shaping up Redwood's progress reports. Lily, though exhausted, willingly complied. Amid this whirlwind, Dave maintained his steady presence, attending story circles, assisting with a few administrative tasks, and even organizing a mini arts and crafts session to keep the kids engaged on a rainy afternoon. Each time Lily saw him, that underlying curiosity about who he was twitched at the back of her mind. But the rapport and ease between them overshadowed her questions. He was kind, and that was enough for now. It was Thursday afternoon when the sponsor's formal proposal arrived via email. Ms. Burns called Lily, nearly shrieking with excitement. "Lily, it's official! They've outlined a renovation plan, and it's bigger than we thought. A new roof, brand new furniture in the reading room, fresh paint, updated technology, everything we've dreamed about." Lily held her phone tight, tears pricking her eyes. "That's amazing, like a miracle. How soon?" "They said they can start next month if we sign off," Ms. Burns practically sang, and they even mentioned the possibility of funding a part-time staff position. "Lily, this means we can expand the reading program. We can do more than just patch holes, we can grow." Her heart pounded. Growth, opportunity, safety for the kids, all from a donor who insisted on remaining anonymous. Lily felt a surge of gratitude for whoever was behind this. "This changes everything," she murmured. "We need to plan a thank you event or something." Ms. Burns laughed. "They might decline a public event, but yes, we'll find a way to express our thanks." When Lily hung up, she sat still for a moment, absorbing the reality. Redwood's future was secure. The kids' future. She felt such profound relief that she pressed a hand to her chest, exhaling gratitude like a prayer. She couldn't wait to share the news with Dave, though a part of her suspected he might already know. Somehow. That evening, David Harrington paced in his penthouse living room, phone to his ear. Ms. Wilcox, his CFO, was briefing him on Redwood's reaction to the finalized proposal. "They're thrilled, sir," she said, her voice echoing in the luxurious space. "They plan to sign immediately. I've assured them that once the paperwork is done, construction can start within weeks." David's chest warmed. He pictured Lily's face bright with joy, the Redwood staff celebrating. This was precisely what he'd wanted, for Redwood's best interest to be served. Still, a flicker of guilt nagged at him. He'd deceived Lily by omission, letting her believe this transformation was orchestrated by a faceless sponsor. How would she feel once she discovered it was him? He tried to soothe himself with the knowledge that Redwood's revitalization outweighed any personal conflict. "Good," he said, forcing confidence into his tone. "Let's keep my name out of it, at least for now. Let them sign. Let the renovations begin." Ms. Wilcox hesitated. "Sir, it might become unavoidable. They'll want to show gratitude, and these sums aren't small. Even if we funnel it through the philanthropic partner, some of your board members might ask questions." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'll deal with that in time. For now, Redwood's needs come first. There was a finality in his voice that brooked no argument. When he ended the call, David gazed through the expansive windows at the glittering city below. From this high vantage point, everything seemed intangible, like a toy city. In the midst of that sprawl was Redwood Community Center, a small haven he had grown to care about more than any looming corporate deal. And within Redwood was Lily. He sank onto his leather couch, letting the tension seep from his body. Soon enough, Redwood's renovation would become evident. Workers arriving, new furniture deliveries, the hum of fresh construction. The illusion of his anonymity might be hard to maintain once those changes were in motion, but maybe by then, Lily would know him well enough to trust that he hadn't done this for accolades. He hoped so, anyway. In the quiet, David played back every moment spent at Redwood, the laughter of children, Lily's patient voice, the way her eyes lit up whenever a child mastered a new word. A faint smile graced his lips. He had all the resources in the world, but it was her simple kindness, paying for a stranger's breakfast, that had shown him what truly mattered. And now he was on the verge of returning that kindness in a big way. The next day, Lily arrived at Redwood to find Ms. Burns practically dancing around the main lobby. "We signed the proposal, Lily," she declared, hugging her. "It's official." Tears pricked Lily's eyes as she laughed, hugging Ms. Burns back. "We did it. Well, they did it. I'm so happy." Ms. Burns sniffed, eyes gleaming. "The next few weeks might be hectic, but once it's done, Redwood will be a place where kids can learn, read, and grow without feeling they're in a rundown space. And you—" She grasped Lily's hands. "You are the heart of our reading program. Maybe we can even pay you a real wage to do what you love." Lily's breath caught. "That's too much. But also—" She broke off, wrestling between humility and relief. A paid position at Redwood would stabilize her shaky finances, let her ditch extra shifts at the library or the side gigs she rarely mentioned. "It's a dream come true," she whispered, voice tremulous. "All we have to do is wait for renovations to start," Ms. Burns said, "and keep doing our best for the kids in the meantime." That afternoon, Lily found Dave in the reading room, flicking through a battered picture book about a mischievous raccoon. He looked up as she approached and immediately noticed the tears brimming in her eyes. Alarm spread across his face. "Lily, what's wrong?" She laughed softly, swiping at her cheeks. "Nothing's wrong, actually. Everything's wonderful. The sponsorship deal is official. Redwood is going to be renovated, properly. The reading room, the whole place. And Ms. Burns said they might bring me on as part-time staff. She exhaled. "I'm overwhelmed." Dave smiled, emotions roiling beneath. "That's incredible." She wiped another stray tear. "Sorry, I'm a mess, but it's because this center matters so much, and you've been such a huge help to us, Dave." She paused, taking a steadying breath. "I wish I could thank the donor personally, but maybe they want privacy." His pulse hammered, the weight of unspoken truth heavy on his tongue. He opened his mouth, about to speak, but at that moment, the children began filing in for the day's session, greeting Lily with wide smiles. The instant to reveal his secret slipped away. Instead, he cleared his throat, rising to greet them, pushing his confession aside once more. The lesson that day thrummed with happiness. Even the kids sensed the center was on the verge of something big. After story time, Lily led them in drawing pictures of what they hoped Redwood might look like in the future. Ideas ranged from a giant slide in the hallway to a jungle-themed reading corner. Dave helped a few kids color their imaginary Redwood with bright crayons. He knew real life wouldn't include slides or jungle vines, but he relished their enthusiasm all the same. When the session ended, Lily lingered, collecting the illustrated pages. She giggled at the outrageous designs. One child had drawn a rooftop garden with monkeys swinging around. Dave sidled up, glancing over her shoulder. "That's a lot of monkeys," he teased gently. She laughed, handing him the drawing. "I love their imagination." Their eyes met, a comfortable warmth holding them for a second longer than usual. Lily felt an odd pull, as though they were on the brink of something deeper, but they were interrupted by Ms. Burns, who poked her head in to remind Lily of some leftover administrative tasks. She nodded, turning to Dave. "I have to help Ms. Burns. Thanks again for all you do here, Dave. I don't know how I managed before you showed up." He swallowed, touched by her words but weighed down by his deception. "It's me who should be thanking you," he replied softly. "I've found something meaningful here." She gave him one last gentle smile, then followed Ms. Burns out, leaving Dave alone in the reading room. The pastel shelves, the flickering overhead lamp, the battered chairs, all of it would soon change because of him, and Lily would eventually learn why. He stood there, soaking in the hush, grappling with the knowledge that he might shatter her trust once the truth emerged. But the path was set. Redwood's transformation was worth any personal risk. He'd just have to hope that when Lily discovered who he really was, David Harrington, the powerful CEO behind the curtain, she would see his heart rather than the corporate mask. And so, with the proposal officially signed and renovations about to begin, Redwood hovered on the cusp of a grand new chapter. Lily brimmed with hope for the center she loved. Dave silently carried the burden of secrets and generosity. Both of them stood at the edge of a profound change, unaware that the revelations soon to come would test not only Redwood's resilience, but the fragile bond they had forged in the light of small kindnesses. By the time renovations at Redwood Community Center officially began, the early summer sun was beating down on the city. Posters in the lobby announced temporary closures of certain rooms while workers repaired the roof, replaced old wiring, and upgraded the lighting. The noise of drills and hammers now mixed with the usual chatter of children, creating a vibrant, if slightly chaotic, symphony. Lily tried her best to adapt. She and Ms. Burns worked out a temporary schedule so that reading sessions could continue in the few areas not under construction. The kids seemed unfazed, peering eagerly at the construction workers each day and asking endless questions about the big changes coming. More than once, Lily had to usher curious little ones away from areas marked with bright orange caution tape. Meanwhile, Dave, who had quietly observed each new development with a mix of satisfaction and secret anxiety, was on hand almost daily. Sometimes he'd arrive in the late afternoon, still in slightly dressier clothes than Lily would have expected of a typical office employee. Other times he slipped in wearing jeans, coordinating volunteer duties with Ms. Burns. Despite his calm exterior, David Harrington felt an undercurrent of tension growing. The transformations he'd orchestrated behind the scenes were now obvious. Fresh, brilliant LED lights replaced flickering bulbs. Brand new chairs began arriving in large trucks, and new tables were stacked in the hallway, awaiting assembly. One humid afternoon, Lily and Dave found themselves lugging boxes of reading supplies out of a classroom to clear space for workers installing new flooring. At one point, Lily paused to catch her breath, brushing away a bead of sweat on her forehead. "Never thought I'd need this much muscle to be a volunteer," she joked, eyeing the stack of boxes. "I should have learned weightlifting, apparently." Dave grinned, tugging at the collar of his shirt. "I'm definitely going to feel this tomorrow." He set a box down gently, then offered Lily a water bottle. "Here, you look like you need a break." She accepted it gratefully, leaning against a wall stripped bare of its old paint. The contractor had promised a fresh coat in bright, welcoming colors. "You know," she began softly, "I still can't believe we're getting all this. I'd almost resigned myself to Redwood being perpetually scrappy and worn down. Now it's like a dream come true." Dave watched the flicker of gratitude and disbelief in her eyes. It gave him a pang, remembering the lengths he'd gone to remain anonymous. "You deserve it. Redwood deserves it," he said simply, hoping his sincerity rang through. She took a sip of water, then angled her head at him. "It's funny. Not long ago, you seemed so curious about Redwood's funding situation. And right after, all this happened. Are you sure you're not the secret millionaire behind it?" Her voice was teasing, but her gaze held genuine curiosity. He froze. It was the question he'd both dreaded and expected for weeks. Summoning his best casual chuckle, he replied, "Me? A millionaire? Believe me, my bank account would disagree." Not untrue, most of his immense wealth was in corporate shares, not just a simple checking account. Still, it was an evasion, and he hated that it tinged his voice with guilt. Lily didn't seem fully convinced, but she let it pass with a light shrug. "Well, if you are, you're an awfully good secret keeper, and if you're not, you're still a hero to these kids." She set the empty water bottle aside, mustering a playful grin. "Either way, let's finish clearing out these boxes before Ms. Burns scolds us." They resumed their task, tension momentarily smoothed over by the comfortable banter of two friends, perhaps something more, working side by side. That evening, Lily left the center later than usual after helping Ms. Burns reorganize a makeshift reading corner in the building's back office. Stepping out into the warm twilight, she spotted Dave near the curb, scrolling through his phone. She offered him a smile. "Heading home?" she asked. He glanced up, pocketing his phone. "Yes, soon. Thought I'd wait and make sure everything was locked up." Touched by his concern, Lily replied, "I appreciate that. I'll be fine, though. My bus stop is just around the corner." They stood there, the quiet hum of the neighborhood settling in. She hesitated, then added in a softer tone, "I'd love to keep talking if you aren't rushing. Maybe a short walk?" David nodded without hesitation. "Sure." They strolled down the sidewalk, away from Redwood's construction noise. Lily chatted about the kids' excitement for their new Redwood. Dave listened, occasionally chiming in about how the new furniture might inspire them to read even more. Underneath the surface, both of them felt the warmth of closeness that had been growing since their first real conversation at that cafe. At a corner beneath a flickering street lamp, Lily paused, turning to him. "You know, I really mean it when I say this center saved me as much as I helped save it," she said softly. "I was at a point where I felt my life was stuck, barely making ends meet, library funding threatened, no real future plans. But Redwood gave me hope, purpose." He looked at her, his heart clenching with both affection and guilt. He wanted to tell her that her own kindness was a guiding light, that the morning she paid for his coffee had changed him in ways he still couldn't fully articulate, that she was the real force behind Redwood's revival. Even if he'd set the renovations in motion, it was her spirit that fueled it. But he couldn't bring himself to break the calm with his hidden identity. Not yet. So he just said, "You've made Redwood what it is, Lily. And you've shown me things I didn't know I was missing." Her eyes widened slightly and a blush tinted her cheeks in the dim light. She started to reply, but a loud car horn startled them, and Lily realized her bus was approaching the nearby stop. She sighed, a slight reluctance in her posture. "That's my ride," she murmured. "I'd better go." He forced a smile. "Go ahead. See you tomorrow?" She nodded, stepping backward toward the bus. "Tomorrow." Then, with a fleeting wave, she climbed aboard, disappearing into the interior lights. Left standing under the street lamp, David's chest tightened. He shoved his hands in his pockets, watching the bus rumble off until it rounded a corner. A swirl of emotions left him feeling both invigorated and terrified. The closeness between them had grown undeniable. But the truth remained, looming in his mind, threatening to fracture this trust if he didn't handle it correctly. The next day, Redwood was abuzz with fresh deliveries. Workers in dusty coveralls hauled in crates labeled "reading room furnishings." Lily clapped excitedly when she peeked inside to see bright, child-friendly tables in primary colors. Ms. Burns practically floated around the building, offering water bottles to the crew and snapping photos for Redwood's tiny social media page. By mid-afternoon, Dave arrived as well, rolling up his sleeves to help the workers position tables. He discovered Lily in the corner, beaming as she arranged new chairs. They were small but sturdy, with curved backs and a playful design that resembled storybook toadstools. She motioned him over. "Check these out," she exclaimed, tapping the seat of one. "They're so cute. The kids will love them." He grinned, carefully moving one near a matching table. "We should test them," he joked, easing himself into the small chair. His knees nearly reached his chest, prompting Lily to burst into laughter. "Definitely child-sized," she teased. Then she grabbed a second chair, deliberately sitting on it, though it wasn't much better for an adult. They both laughed at the sight of themselves perched on colorful mini furniture, knees bent awkwardly. For a moment, the swirl of renovations, secrets, and future uncertainties dissolved into shared joy. Around the same time, in a far more opulent setting, David's CFO, Ms. Wilcox, was guiding one of Harrington Innovations' board members through some philanthropic reports. The board member raised a sharp eyebrow at the large sum allocated to a local community center renovation, absent any official corporate press release or mention of David Harrington's involvement. "This is unorthodox," the board member noted. "Why invest so heavily without the usual brand synergy or publicity?" Ms. Wilcox kept her face neutral. "Mr. Harrington insisted we maintain anonymity for this project. It's not a direct Harrington Innovations donation. We used a secondary philanthropic channel as he instructed. The money is his personally. But he's still our CEO, and if something goes sideways?" The board member's tone conveyed obvious concern. "I understand," Ms. Wilcox responded calmly. "He believes it's a worthy cause. I have no reason to doubt his judgment." The board member chewed their lip, uncertain. "I'll need to speak with him about this. We can't have hidden dealings that raise eyebrows among shareholders." Ms. Wilcox nodded, aware that David would have to face questions soon. Redwood's transformation was big enough that even corporate circles had begun to gossip about where his attention was going. Yet Ms. Wilcox also knew David was steadfast in his desire to keep Redwood separate from Harrington Innovations' grand PR machine. Oblivious to these boardroom rumblings, Lily and Dave continued to help the workers that afternoon, hauling away discarded packaging, setting up small reading lamps that looked like miniature streetlights. The reading room was already transformed, walls newly painted in soft pastel with a whimsical mural of floating books on one side. Lily found it breathtaking. Where once water stains and peeling paint haunted the space, now a bright, imaginative haven blossomed. At one point, Ms. Burns stepped back to admire the near-finished room. She wiped a tear from her eye, turning to Lily and Dave. "Look at this. This is exactly what our children deserve." She swallowed hard, fighting more emotion. "I wish we knew who to thank." Lily placed a gentle hand on Ms. Burns's shoulder. "Whoever they are, I hope they know how grateful we are." Dave hovered behind them, quiet, heart pounding with the knowledge that it was him, that Ms. Burns's heartfelt words were directed at his own invisible generosity. He mustered a small smile, though inside he felt a mix of pride and apprehension. His gaze caught Lily's, and for a split second he wondered if she could see past the surface of Dave. But she only returned his look with warmth, oblivious to the truth. Some of the kids filtered in, gaping at the newly assembled tables and chairs. One little girl squealed at the bright green toadstool seat, bouncing onto it as if it were a throne. Laughter and joy echoed in the refurbished space. In that moment, David's sacrifices and subterfuge felt worthwhile. He'd done the right thing for Redwood. And for Lily. Yet the question remained. How long until the facade crumbled? How long until someone from Harrington Innovations or the board forced his hand, revealing that David Harrington was behind Redwood's miraculous change? And when that moment came, would Lily see it as a betrayal or simply as a truth he'd lacked the courage to speak? For now, the newly colorful walls, the children's laughter, and Lily's soft smile all conspired to keep him in the present, refusing to let worries about tomorrow dampen the triumph unfolding before his eyes. The renovations at Redwood Community Center wrapped up faster than anyone had dared hope. By early July, the freshly painted walls gleamed with vibrant colors, the new furniture shone under upgraded lighting, and the reading room felt like a miniature wonderland for young minds. Children who'd known only the battered, dimly lit space were dazzled by how welcoming and comfortable their new home away from home had become. Everywhere, there was talk of a grand reopening celebration, though Ms. Burns laughed that Redwood never truly closed, not even for construction. In this swirl of achievements and relief, Lily found her schedule busier than ever. On top of library shifts, she guided the children through their first day in the fully completed reading room, taking in the wonder on each small face. She introduced them to brand new books lined up in neat rows on pristine shelves. She watched them settle onto sturdy little chairs with bright color patterns, reading quietly or sharing stories with friends. It was the fulfillment of a dream she'd barely known she harbored. Yet amid all the positive frenzy, an undercurrent of tension crept in for Dave. The Redwood project was a triumph, precisely what he'd hoped to accomplish, and the staff's gratitude swelled daily. Ms. Burns kept talking about wanting to find the donor, to thank them formally. The children composed thank you cards in colorful crayons, hoping they might someday reach the mysterious sponsor. And Lily, who used to joke about Dave being the secret financier, began to regard him with gentle puzzlement whenever Redwood's huge success was mentioned. There was an unspoken question in her eyes, one he had managed to sidestep for weeks. But the time for sidestepping was coming to an end. It happened on a steamy afternoon just before Redwood's planned thank you party, a modest gathering to celebrate the completion of renovations. Lily was setting out homemade cupcakes on a newly assembled table in the reading room, smiling at how the bright frosting matched the walls. Ms. Burns bustled around, placing balloons and finalizing the day's schedule. A few volunteers readied name tags and an activity station for the children. "Have you seen Dave?" Ms. Burns asked, glancing at her watch. "He said he'd bring extra snacks." Lily shook her head, peering around the busy lobby. "Not yet, but he's usually on time." Then, as if on cue, the front doors swung open. Instead of Dave in his usual neat but casual attire, two sharply dressed individuals entered, a man and a woman in suits, scanning the newly renovated center with calculated interest. Lily paused, a dollop of blue frosting on her finger. They looked distinctly out of place among the cheerful chaos of Redwood. Ms. Burns hurried over, offering her standard warm greeting. The visitors introduced themselves as executives from Harrington Innovations, and they asked to speak with David Harrington. "David Harrington?" Ms. Burns repeated, confused. "I don't think I know, unless—" She trailed off, eyes drifting to Lily, who was frowning in equal puzzlement. The suits clarified that David Harrington was the anonymous donor behind Redwood's renovations, that he was expected to show up for the final inspection. Lily's heart seized. David Harrington. All at once, the puzzle pieces slammed into place. The timing of Redwood's sponsorship, Dave's curious schedule flexibility, his pointed questions about finances, the flash of guilt in his eyes whenever Lily praised the unknown donor. Shock hit her like a jolt of lightning. Dave was David Harrington, and he'd stood by her side for months, never telling her who he really was. Across the lobby, the front doors opened again, and Dave, dressed in a collared shirt and carrying a container of snacks, froze. His eyes flicked from Ms. Burns to Lily to the impeccably suited pair. He recognized them instantly, two board members who had grown impatient with his secrecy. They had come to Redwood unannounced, determined to confront him and claim credit for the company's philanthropic involvement, or at least force some clarity. Silence stretched, heavy and electrified. Ms. Burns, uncertain, looked from Dave to the board members. Lily stood still, cupcake in hand, hardly breathing. Finally, The female executive from Harrington Innovations cleared her throat. "There you are, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice half exasperated, half triumphant. "We've been trying to reach you about formalizing this donation under the company's philanthropic record." At her words, Ms. Burns gasped. Another volunteer nearly dropped a roll of tape, and Lily felt her throat tighten. David Harrington, stepped forward, letting out a careful breath. "Could we discuss this somewhere private?" he asked, his voice taut. But Ms. Burns shook her head, expression awash with confusion. "So it's true? You're the one behind all this?" The staff and volunteers who had gathered to decorate now stared in disbelief. Children milled around, sensing the tension, wondering if they'd done something wrong. Finally, David met Lily's gaze, guilt etched into his face. She saw 1,000 conflicting emotions flicker across his features. "I'm sorry," he whispered. It wasn't just an apology to Redwood, it was directed at Lily for the half-truths and the secrets. She swallowed hard, feeling foolish for not piecing it together earlier. Yet, more than anger, she felt hurt. Memories flooded her. All the times she'd confided in Dave, describing Redwood's struggles, praising the unknown donor's generosity. All the while, he had known the truth. Ms. Burns sensed the mounting tension. Let's move somewhere less crowded," she suggested gently, trying to keep the children from feeling the brunt of the awkwardness. She shepherded the board members toward a small, newly finished office across the hall. David, no longer just Dave, lingered for a moment, turning to Lily. "I had reasons," he murmured, voice low. "I'll explain." She nodded stiffly, cheeks burning. "I think you should." He followed Ms. Burns and the executives out, leaving Lily standing amidst half-baked celebration preparations. She pressed a hand to her chest, tears threatening. The center she loved was filled with bright new wonders because of him, but it suddenly felt overshadowed by the weight of betrayal. In the small office, Ms. Burns closed the door, leaving Lily in the hallway, uncertain and torn. Through the glass window, she saw David and the two executives exchange words. She couldn't hear them, but from their body language it was clear the board members were pressing for official recognition. David stood tall, an unfamiliar sternness in his posture, a far cry from the quiet volunteer who painted hearts on children's cheeks. Ms. Burns, caught in the crossfire, looked anxious, glancing between them. At last, the door opened. The executives marched off with forced smiles, claiming to have other matters that needed their attention. Ms. Burns hurried after them, perhaps wanting to mitigate any corporate dealings Redwood might be forced into. That left David alone by the threshold of the office. He stepped out into the hallway, eyes searching for Lily. When he found her, she stiffened, uncertain how to react. They stood there, the hum of the air conditioner filling the tense silence. Finally, Lily cleared her throat, voice trembling. "So you're David Harrington, the CEO of Harrington Innovations." "Yes," he admitted softly. "I never meant to deceive you. I wanted to help Redwood without overshadowing it with corporate branding. I wanted to keep it pure." She blinked back tears, her emotions a chaotic swirl of gratitude, hurt, and lingering affection. "I understand wanting anonymity. But why pretend you were just an ordinary volunteer? Why let me—" Her voice caught. "Why let me trust you? Share everything while you kept such a big secret?" His expression was pained. "At first, I wasn't sure how you'd react to my position. People sometimes treat me differently when they know who I am. You treated me like a regular person, not a CEO. And I valued that. Then, as time went on, it got harder to tell you because I knew how big the impact on Redwood would be." A tear slipped down Lily's cheek. "You could have told me sooner. Saved me some confusion." She paused, struggling to keep her composure. "But I won't lie. I'm also grateful for what you've done for the center. Everything is incredible. The kids are happier than ever." He stepped closer, voice husky with sincerity. "I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to make your world better, because you made mine better. You don't know how much that day in the cafe changed me." She stared, recalling the morning she'd paid for a stranger's coffee, never imagining that stranger would be a powerful billionaire, let alone become her friend. "That was you," she murmured, "all this time." He nodded. Yes. A part of her wanted to lash out, accuse him of betrayal, of playing with her emotions. Another part recognized the genuine ache in his eyes, the real kindness behind his decisions. Redwood thrived now because of his generosity, whether or not he'd hidden his name. She wiped her tear-streaked face, exhaling shakily. "What now?" she whispered. David reached for her hand tentatively. "I'd like to keep helping Redwood, if Ms. Burns will still allow it. And I want to be here with you as more than just a sponsor, Lily. I want you to know me, the real me." She hesitated, eyes on their joined hands, then looked up at him. The worry, the care, the love, yes, love, was all there, plain to see. Lily's mind flicked through the last few months, the gentle volunteer, the secret donor, the puzzle that had haunted her. Finally, she swallowed her trembling emotions and nodded. "We'll need time," she said softly, tears still wet on her cheeks. "But Redwood wouldn't be the same without you." Relief and gratitude flashed across his face. He squeezed her hand, and they stood together in the hushed corridor, the swirl of renovations and board-level politicking momentarily fading into the background. Later that day, Ms. Burns gathered everyone in the newly finished reading room for the thank-you party. She stood in front, explaining how Redwood's transformation had been funded by an anonymous donor, who was now not quite so anonymous. Some volunteers were shocked to learn the friendly Dave was actually David Harrington. A few were wary, but seeing Lily by his side, they cautiously accepted the news. The children, oblivious to corporate titles, only cared that he was the one who painted silly dragons on their cheeks and helped them sound out tricky words. In the end, Redwood's staff and families applauded, cheering for the bright new space. David tried to remain subdued, shifting the spotlight to Ms. Burns, Lily, and the volunteers who'd put heart and soul into Redwood long before he arrived. Yet Ms. Burns insisted on a group photo by the rainbow-colored mural. The camera captured the moment, staff, children, and a tall CEO standing beside Lily, arms slung around the kids, all beaming with pride. As the applause died down, Lily found David's gaze across the room. She offered a small, soft smile. It wasn't complete forgiveness. Her trust needed time to heal, but it was an olive branch of hope. He smiled back, aware that rebuilding what might have been lost between them was now his next endeavor. In the days that followed, Redwood shone brighter than ever, brimming with possibilities for new programs and deeper community engagement. Lily accepted the part-time staff position Ms. Burns offered, dedicating herself fully to fostering the children's love of reading. David, though juggling corporate responsibilities and a board that demanded public recognition, continued to volunteer in person, this time as David Harrington, no more disguises. It felt strange at first, but the kids treated him no differently, and Lily slowly relaxed around the truth he had finally shared. Their journey had begun with a simple act of kindness, a humble girl paying for a stranger's breakfast. Neither could have foreseen how that moment would feed a powerful CEO's heart, driving him to transform not only a small community center but also his own understanding of what mattered in life. Now, the entire cafe of Lily's life, Redwood Community Center, her circle of volunteers, the children she cherished, stood speechless, though not in shock, but in wonder and gratitude. As Lily walked the newly renovated halls, guiding a group of kids to their next reading session, she caught sight of David in the lobby, talking to a parent. He glanced up, their eyes meeting in a gentle exchange of warmth and promise. In that shared look, Lily knew that Redwood wasn't the only thing transformed. They both were, and whatever future unfolded next, They would face it with a bond forged through kindness, honesty, and the recognition that even the smallest act of generosity can spark the most extraordinary change. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.